Chapter 519. Wu-Ming did not choose to let Chaldea retrieve the Holy Grail. Not to mention that Chaldea had not been contacted yet. Moreover, even if Wu-Ming was contacted, he would not easily hand over the Holy Grail that he had just obtained to Chaldea's group. It was not that Wu-Ming was greedy, but because Wu-Ming was worried that the Holy Grail newly created by the Magic King would have some kind of trap. Wu-Ming did not think that the Magic King's game would be so simple with only a few forces. However, it seemed that for the current Gadotsi and others, the 5 forces were indeed difficult. However, to Wu-Ming, the current chaotic battle between the 5 forces did not pose much of a threat. Although he did not know why the Magic King did not appear in person, even so, he could not do anything to Wu-Ming. After all, it was not his main body. However, the Magic King, who did not appear, gave Wu-Ming a feeling that there was something more important that he could not come. However, when they were in the underground of London, the Magic King said to Gadotsi and others that as long as they did not open all 7 singularities, they would not be a threat to him at all. Just like how ordinary people would not care whether ants could hurt them, whether it was 1 ant or 7 ants, it was all the same. According to the Magic King, only when all 7 singularities were saved would he take the initiative to kill Gadotsi and others. During this time, Wu-Ming did not think that the Magic King would sit in front of the TV and eat popcorn while watching Gadotsi and others take risks. Then there was no doubt that the Magic King also had something to do. However, because of Wu-Ming's intervention, Wu-Ming was not sure whether the Magic King really did not eat popcorn and sit in front of the TV to watch what happened at this singularity. In any case, these new Holy Grails did not make Wu-Ming feel at ease. So Wu-Ming and Gadotsi agreed that the Holy Grails that they obtained later would be temporarily guarded by him. Wu-Ming and others walked out of Jiro City and began to move towards Riverton in the north. Jiro City did not seem to be a noble phantasm that would disappear with the servants. The Japanese forces were destroyed, and the Holy Grail was recovered by Wu-Ming, but Jiro City was still there. It was still the same ruins, or even worse, razed to the ground. Let's not talk about the collision between Wu-Ming and Ibaraki Boy's noble artifacts. The demon god pillars, poisonous fog, and all kinds of destruction were enough to destroy Jiwei City, which had lost its defenses due to Ji's coma and overload. Wu-Ming guessed that Shutendaji. Because of this, he used the Holy Grail to summon the summoned monsters to leave the summoned monsters, leaving only the servants. Wu-Ming Doji. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Nightingale was to be in the middle. In the middle was to the rears. In this way, Wu-Ming Doji's group did not move fast, and it could even be said that they were moving slowly. After all, they had just won a battle, and there was no need to be too anxious. So Wu-Ming Doji's group of 6 walked slowly. In fact, it was also to take care of Gadotsi. After all, it was rare for them to come into contact with the current crisis, so there was no need to carry Gadotsi as if they were transporting goods. However, they could not be too careless, as the current lineup of 6 people could be seen. Wu-Ming Doji and Karna were in front and behind, while Matthew and Nightingale were guarding Gadotsi in the middle. As for Tamamo Mei, who had been following behind Wu-Ming, she followed by herself. Besides, it would not affect them much, so Wu-Ming acquiesced. However, it seemed that it really did affect them. Along the way, Gadotsi Doji and Matthew kept looking at Wu-Ming strangely, as if they were shy, as if they were praising him, as if they were gratified. In short, it was that kind of strange look that Wu-Ming could not put his finger on. The more Wu-Ming Doji thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong, so he asked Tamamo Mei, "Did you say something strange when you came here and met up with Tachika Doji and the others?" "Lord Celander, you're overthinking it. I merely politely introduced myself as your fiancé to you, Master." Tamamo Mei smiled elegantly at Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming Doji finally understood why Gadotsi Doji and Matthew Doji were looking at him in such a way. "But I didn't say that I wanted you to be my fiancé." Forget it. Let's leave it at that for now." Seeing that it was because Tamamo Mei had fought the demon god Shutong, Wu-Ming Doji decided to take a loss and leave their relationship at that for the time being. Hello, 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 hello. Speaking of which, why is Ms. Nightingale here? Wu Ming asked Gadotsi and the others behind him. Although Wu Ming's team of 6 had arranged themselves in a strict manner, Wu Ming, who was leading the way, and Karna, who was bringing up the rear, were only a few meters away from Gadotsi. Therefore, Wu Ming didn't need to raise his voice or wait until he was close enough. He could just ask directly, "Oh, you're talking about this problem. Actually, it's like this." Gadotsi smiled and explained to Wu Ming. After Wu Ming heard this, he began to have some doubts about luck. That night, Wu Ming instigated Nightingale to perform an amputation operation on Achilles. Achilles was already fed up with the berserker, so he ran away. Naturally, Nightingale let go of this excellent amputation material and chased after him. The two chased each other on the land southeast of the Missouri River that was not under the influence of Rome and Greece. In this way, Nightingale chased after Achilles for a few days, but in the end, Achilles was more skillful and escaped Nightingale's pursuit. After all, he was a cavalry. Nightingale, on the other hand, could not find her target, so she began to save others along the way. For some reason, ordinary natives, soldiers of the Revolutionary Army, and so on were still wandering. Humans were not to be underestimated. Even in an era where the 5 forces were divided, humans could survive on their own. The location of Denver was not so much located in the Rocky Mountains, but more accurately, it was located at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. In other words, the terrain was not high. Coincidentally, Nightingale's original location was south of Riverton and north of Denver. In this way, if she walked a little further south, Nightingale would not be far from Denver. Coincidentally, Shitindaji's poison was a pathogen for Nightingale. After feeling the poison blown away by the explosion between Wu Ming and Ibaraki Duji's noble artifacts, Nightingale came to Denver with her obsession as a berserker. Since most of the poison in Denver had been blown away, Nightingale was able to find people or things that were more poisonous at the moment. And there was no doubt that Shitindaji was that poison. Then, Nightingale came to Gadotsi's side and used her noble artifact to resist Shitindaji's poison. What happened later, Wu Ming also knew about it. With her obsession as a pathogen, Nightingale, as a berserker, found Gadotsi just like that. Wu Ming could only smile and say, "That's really as expected of a berserker." Chapter 520. Wu Ming's group didn't waste any more time. In just an hour, they arrived at Riverton. This included Karna from the American faction and Tamamonome from the Japanese faction. After all, the two of them were now on the same side, and Wu Ming didn't think it was a secret that Riverton was a gathering place for followers, so he brought them there. After returning to Riverton, Wu Ming briefly told Karen and Geronimo about what they had done, including how they were accidentally found by Nightingale, Karna's support, and how Tamamonome had joined Wu Ming. Of course, when he introduced Tamamonome, he introduced her as a partner. Although Wu Ming did benefit from Tamamonome, there was no such thing as giving one's body in return for a favor, let alone a man giving his body to a woman. Although Wu Ming was a bit thick-skinned, he wouldn't do such a shameless thing. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Let's not talk about other things, but with Karna joining us, we are already a lot stronger. After listening to Wu Ming's explanation, Karna nodded affirmatively. As an existence on the same level as his own disciple, Karna's strength could be said to be the best. Coupled with the memory of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, Karna was relieved that this once troublesome enemy had become an ally. Sure enough, you also remember the Battle of the Holy Grail. Karna wasn't surprised to see that Karna knew him. Karna didn't think that he was special. Since he could remember the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, then the other followers in the Battle of the 14 Horsemen would certainly remember him. Hearing Karna's words, Karna smiled at Karna to show his friendliness. At this time, Wu Ming looked around and found that something was wrong. By the way, aren't there some people missing? Wu Ming looked at the followers in the room. It was obvious that there were some people missing. As for Elizabeth and the others, they ran into a little trouble. "It's fine." Gadotsi coughed awkwardly. At this moment, Gadotsi was extremely embarrassed, and Matthew was beside her, looking like he was ready for battle. This made Wu Ming wonder if Gadotsi had a moral crisis just now. When Wu Ming told Geronimo and Sharon what happened, Gadotsi was attacked by Kyoheim. After that, Elizabeth, Robin Hood, and Billy Boy threw themselves at Gadotsi and shouted, Lady and Jun, Lady and Jun. Kyoheim was taken away, and the scene of Gadotsi being tightly protected by Matthew appeared. As if he had thought of something, Wu Ming no longer asked about it. Then he asked about another person. What about Rama? He won't find trouble with Greece. Other than Elizabeth and a few other servants in the team, Wu Ming found it strange that Romo, the wounded, was not here. After a few days of rest, it was reasonable to say that Rama had almost recovered. Because of this, Rama should be here in such a situation. The only reason why Rama wasn't here was that he had gone to Greece to save his wife. That's right. Although Rama belongs to the ranks of the lone followers, the king is proud and arrogant. From the beginning, he had been searching for Cedo alone and did not accept our help. If it weren't for your serious injuries, we wouldn't have met again, Karen explained. And through this lesson, the king has also thought it through. He is no longer alone and has decided to join us, Geronimo added. And then he went alone again? Wu Ming wondered. Wasn't it obvious? Although he decided to go with everyone, in the end, he still went to Greece alone. However, Sharon shook his head. This time, he was not alone. Achilles went with him. In other words, after Achilles got rid of Nightingale, he returned to Riverton. Then, under Rama's strong desire, he listened to his teacher and accompanied Rama to Greece. Spartacus also went with them. Geronimo added and smiled. Wu Ming instantly understood Geronimo's smile and felt a little embarrassed. If Geronimo hadn't mentioned it, Wu Ming would have forgotten about him. Back then, he had used the pseudo-heavenly lock to tie Spartacus up and threw him into the woods. It seemed that Spartacus was finally found by Sharon and the others. As for Wu Ming's pseudo-heavenly lock, it was estimated that its magic power had been exhausted and broken. After all, it had been used for a long time. Without Wu Ming's magic power to replenish it, it was normal for it to break. Anyway, Wu Ming did not feel bad about it. After all, he still had a few pseudo-heavenly locks in his spatial relics. Let's not talk about Spartacus for now. If Achilles went with them, I'm relieved. Wu Ming was relieved. He did not want Rama to be killed again. Although Achilles was easily tied up by Wu Ming's trick, as a demigod hero, Achilles was not to be underestimated. Not only did he have an almost invincible defense like Karna, but he also had many relics. For example, Achilles' shield alone was enough to block the most powerful relics of Karna and Wu Ming, which were comparable to natural disasters. Of course, although it would break after blocking for a while, it was enough for a battle that could end in a few seconds. Since Rama and the others had gone to Greece, let's work on both sides. Whether it was Sharon, Geronimo, Nightingale, or Karna and Tamanome, they all understood what Wu Ming meant. Are we going to have a final battle? Gadotsi also understood what Wu Ming meant. She was shocked. That's right. Wu Ming decided to end the mutation of this singularity as soon as possible. With the Celtic forces, the American forces, and the lone follower forces joining forces, and the Japanese forces withdrawing, Wu Ming felt that now was the best time to destroy both Greece and Rome. Wu Ming had always felt that the trap set by the Magician King at this singularity was not that simple. He felt that Shutendaji was not the only one who knew Wu Ming's identity and was targeting Wu Ming. The longer this dragged on, the more Wu Ming felt that something was going to happen. Sharon, Geronimo, what do you think? Wu Ming asked the two of them who were acting as the wise ones. I think we should slow down a little. After all, Rama and the others just left yesterday. They should be in Greece now, Geronimo said calmly. However, Sharon expressed a different opinion. I agree with Salander, but I suggest we only attack one of the forces for now. Chapter 521. Immediately afterward, Sharon began to analyze. And as far as we can see, our three-party cooperation can cause an overwhelming force to one of them. But if we deal with both forces at the same time, we will inevitably be suppressed by both sides. After all, although we have a large number of servants, if we deal with both forces at the same time, we will have to split up. Whether it's Greece or Rome, I don't think I'm a pushover, so I think we are likely to suffer losses. Wooming nodded. Sharon was right. If Wooming was not included, it could be calculated like this. The leader of the Celts, Maeve, had 3 servants, Finn, Dilmaud, and the unknown Indian servant. Needless to say, Maeve and the other Celtic servants were not weak. Although Silent Wonder had never seen the Indian servant before, he knew that the Celts were quite powerful since they were related to Rama. The American forces only had 3 servants. Needless to say, the leader Edison was very weak, and Helena could only be an auxiliary mage. The two's combat power was not high. Only Garna was strong, so they did not dare to act rashly. The leader of the lone servant force could be said to be Gadotsi, and there were a lot of servants: Matthew, Achilles, Sharon, Geronimo, Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Kyoheim, Elizabeth, Spartacus, and Rama. As for Tamamo no Mae, she was temporarily assigned to the lone servant force. Although they had the largest number of servants, there were not many who had strong combat power. Strictly speaking, only Achilles, Sharon, and Rama had first-line combat power, and the rest, whether it was Geronimo, Robin Hood, or even Billy Boy, they were not strong. As for Kyoheim and Elizabeth, well, if they were compared to Wooming, Garna, and others, they would be honest mascots. Well, if Kyoheim didn't shout Anjin Sama and Elizabeth didn't sing, they would become very popular. Tamamo no Mae's words were mentioned before. If she was summoned as a berserker or some other job rank, Tamamo no Mae would be able to unleash the terrifying power of one of the 3 great monsters. But now, she was just an ordinary witch fox. Lastly, if Spartacus could release his noble phantasm, he would be a very good troublemaker. However, he would be tied up in a few moves, so he cannot be counted on. Moreover, even if he did release a precious artifact, it would be self-destructing, and the price would be too great. Didn't you see that Caligula's berserker, who didn't have any powerful abilities, was stabbed by a noble phantasm? Although it was inappropriate to say so, in the face of a top-level servant like Wooming, Wooming was certain that no one present, not even Sharon, would be able to survive if they fought with their lives on the line. Although it seemed like Wooming was a little arrogant, unfortunately, this was the truth. Karong is right. Since that's the case, let's split into 2 teams. Wooming decided to eliminate one of the forces first, and then attack the remaining forces. Immediately afterward, Wooming told everyone about his opportunity. They were still divided into 2 teams. The first team was led by Sharon and Geronimo. Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Kyoheim, Elizabeth, plus Edison and Helena, a total of 8 people. Their task was to go to the Roman camp and use all kinds of tricks to distract the Roman forces. The purpose was to delay the Roman forces and have no time to deal with the Greek forces. The Greek forces, on the other hand, were led by Wooming and other powerful servants to form the second team to eliminate them. Wooming returned to Washington first, and then led Maeve, Finn, and Dilmaud to Greece. Karna, on the other hand, was to join Rama, Achilles, and Spartacus to attack the Greek forces together with the Celtic forces brought by Wooming. For now, the Greek forces were much more difficult to deal with than the Roman forces. The Arcadian huntress, the divine magician, and the demigod hero were all stronger than the less mysterious Caesar, Cleopatra, and the others. Because of this, Wooming decided to gather powerful forces to eliminate the Greek forces first, and then attack the Roman forces. When Wooming and the other servants of the second team attacked the Greek forces, Sharon would lead the first team to entangle the Roman forces. Facing the less mysterious Roman forces, Wooming believed that Sharon and the others would not suffer any casualties. After all, they did not have to fight with their lives on the line. They just had to interfere with the Roman forces. That's a good plan. After all, even if we go to Greece with the second team, we won't be able to do much. It's better to go to Rome to interfere. Sharon agreed with the plan. The rest of the servants, Geronimo, Tamamo, and Karna, also had no objections. At this time, Gadotsi spoke. That, Matthew and I. Gadotsi asked weakly. Matthew also nodded. They could not contact Chaldea at the moment, so Gadotsi and the others could only decide what to do next for the time being. Wuming pondered for a moment, then said, "To Chica and Matthew, I originally wanted you to go with Sharon, but as the master, I have to ask for your opinion, so you can choose which team to follow." After hearing Wuming's words, Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other. But it didn't take long for Gadotsi to speak under Matthew's affirmative gaze. "Matthew and I will follow Teacher Ma's team." Then, Gadotsi stated a reason. "After all, you have to fight for your life. If Matthew and I go, it may cause trouble for you. After all, Matthew is not good at attacking. Let Matthew and I go to Rome to interfere," Gadotsi said to Wuming with a smile. Although Gadotsi wanted to go with Wuming, she knew that she was a human master, and her servant Matthew was only a defensive type. Following Wuming and the others' attack team would inevitably cause trouble. Therefore, Gadotsi suppressed her desire and chose to go with Sharon and the others to Rome. "It's really hard for you, Tachika. It's great that you can think like this," Wuming said as he touched Gadotsi's little head. Although Wuming could also protect Gadotsi, he was always somewhat restrained. Therefore, Wuming was really pleased that Gadotsi could choose to follow Sharon to Rome. "It's nothing. I think if the doctor and the director were here, they would let me choose a team." Gadotsi smiled slightly, enjoying Wuming's touch. Retracting his hand, Wuming looked at everyone. "Since the task has been assigned, then I will leave first. I will inform Edison to meet you here later. At that time, I will use Edison's communicator to talk to you." Later, Geronimo informed Elisabet and others of the plan. They naturally had no objection, and they were quite excited, especially after Kyoheim knew that she and Gadotsi were in the same team. In this way, Wuming and Karna left together, and everyone was preparing for the upcoming battle. Chapter 522. Wuming and Karna left Riverton, but they were not going in the same direction. Karna was heading to the Great Lakes, which was the territory of the Greek forces, to look for Rama and the others. Achilles, Rama, and Spartacus set off during the day. According to Wuming's speculation, even if they were there, it was unlikely that they would rush into the Greek followers recklessly. Maybe they were just observing. After all, after this crisis, Rama also found the problem. Recklessness would not only fail to save his wife, but it would also put him in danger. After all, he was a king. Even if he was more impulsive when he was young, Rama was not ignorant. At present, there had been no movement from the Greek side, so Wuming judged that they had not made a move yet. This was good. Karna could meet up with them first, then lurk and wait for reinforcements. As for Karna's identity, Wuming gave him a runestone, which contained a video recorded by Wuming, which was enough to prove Karna's identity. Besides, Achilles had also teamed up with Karna before, when they were 14 knights, so he knew that Karna would not lie. Therefore, Wuming was not worried about Karna's identity. In this way, Karna headed toward the northeast. Wuming, on the other hand, went south, preparing to use his assassin behavior to pass through the gap between Greece and Rome and return to Celtic. Coincidentally, although it was daytime when Wuming and the others attacked Giro City, it was almost dark when they arrived at Riverton. The night was suitable for Wuming to sneak away. However, Wuming thought about it carefully and laughed. Not to mention that it would take too long to carefully rush back. Wuming had a portal. Wuming had to rely on himself before because he had never been to those places. Now that he needed to rush back home, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? Therefore, Wuming directly opened the portal and went to Washington. In the president's office in Washington, a black-purple spatial ripple appeared in front of the desk. Then, Wuming walked out of the portal. "You're back." Wuming let out a long sigh of relief, giving off the feeling of a wanderer returning home. However, Wuming chuckled self-deprecatingly. The feeling of home could only be felt in the root. After that, Wuming looked around the empty office. The office gave Wuming the feeling that no one had come here after he left. The books on the table were still the same as when Wuming left. "Xiao Sai, you're back." At this moment, the door to the office suddenly opened. The person who called Wuming Little Sai was undoubtedly Maeve. Then, Maeve threw herself into Wu Ming's arms. "I'm sorry, Maeve. I was delayed by something and came back late." Silent Wonder smiled at Maeve. His smile naturally contained an apologetic tone. However, Maeve didn't care. After shaking her head, she broke away from Wu Ming's embrace. Then, Maeve hugged one of Wu Ming's arms and said with a smile, "It's good that you're back. If there were outsiders here, they would probably be scared to death by Maeve's behavior. Therefore, the cold, arrogant queen who didn't treat men as humans had become so gentle. She was many times gentler than before Wu Ming left. Even Wu Ming was shocked. Was it because they hadn't seen each other for a long time that led to the release of mental stress? Ahem. In layman's terms, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Wu Ming sat on the president's chair without the slightest bit of guilt. The poor president had already died. Wu Ming hugged Maeve, who was sitting on his lap, and began to tell her about his experience. Maeve, on the other hand, was listening attentively, her big eyes sparkling. In other words, as long as we join forces with the American forces and followers to eradicate Greece and Rome, we will win. Maeve smiled sweetly. Wu Ming nodded. Then he asked Maeve a little strangely, "Maeve, why are you so happy today?" Wu Ming asked. Since she came in, she had been very gentle until now. She was much gentler than the Maeve from a few days ago. Of course, she was still not as gentle as an ordinary girl, but this was not easy for Maeve. You can't expect a queen to be gentle. This was already a very gentle level for Maeve. Facing Wu Ming's puzzled question, Maeve hugged Wu Ming's neck and looked at Wu Ming's face and said happily, "Because Sai took off her helmet." When Maeve said this, Wu Ming realized that he didn't wear his helmet anymore. No one knew when it started, but Wu Ming had taken off his helmet and maintained the appearance of only wearing white armor. Wu Ming would only close his helmet during the battle, but once the battle was over, he would take it off again. Although Wu Ming was used to it, Maeve was not. She had never seen Wu Ming's true face in this singularity. Of course, it didn't mean that Wu Ming covered his true face to make Maeve suspicious. After all, no matter who it was, if their lover always covered their face with a mask when they were with their other half, the other half would be very depressed if they couldn't see their lover's face. "So, I won't wear a helmet in the future. How about that?" Without apologizing, Wu Ming asked with a smile. With the relationship between the two, there was no need for an apology. "Yeah, but no matter what, I like little Sai." Maeve gently leaned in Wu Ming's arms and enjoyed this moment of peace. Wu Ming gently patted Maeve's back and enjoyed a moment of peace with Maeve. Sure enough, Maeve is actually just a little girl who lacks love. After a moment of tenderness, Wu Ming and Maeve left the office. After all, there was no time to lose. It was better to mobilize the troops and start the final battle. By the way, Sai, that Indian servant left our side. Left? What happened? Although leaving a servant was not a big deal for the current situation, Wu Ming still wanted to know the inside story. That servant is the hero of India, Achuna. He temporarily joined us on the grounds of following us to find Karna. Soon after he left. Wu Ming was taken aback. Achuna's mortal enemy was Karna. It seemed that he was still very persistent after death. No wonder he had some relationship with Rama. Rama was the 7th incarnation of Vishnu. Vishnu's 6th incarnation was the axe-wielding Rama, who appeared in the Mahabharata. It had some relationship with Achuna. But more importantly, the axe-wielding Rama was Karna's teacher. Karna's spear was transformed from the axe-wielding Rama's eternal blade. Wu Ming's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Karna won't meet Achuna halfway, right? Chapter 523. Maeve, gather Finn and the others and head to Chicago. I'll go check on Riverton. I have a feeling that Ajo and Karna have met. When it came to serious matters, Maeve was not ambiguous at all and immediately nodded. Wu Ming opened a portal and walked in. After Maeve saw Wu Ming leave, she reverted from a pretty girl to an incomparably domineering queen. She then gave an order to the Wu Ming guards outside. All troops head to Chicago. Outside Riverton town, a dark purple teleportation gate appeared. Wu Ming walked out. Although Wu Ming was going to Riverton, Wu Ming chose the place where he and Karna had parted. Wu Ming looked in the direction Karna had left. Lightning and fire kept appearing in the sky there. Wuming immediately took out his communication device and contacted Edison. Even if Karna and Ajo met, they wouldn't be able to determine the winner in a short time. "Hello, this is Thomas Edison." The Lionhead's deep voice came from Wuming's communication device. Listening to Edison's incomparably serious voice, Wu Ming was amused. Could you imagine a giant lionhead seriously talking on the phone? "I'm Serene, President Edison." Wu Ming then told Edison to attack this place. Wu Ming also told Edison that Karna was with him. "Understood. I'll go to Riverton with Lady Helena immediately with the mechanical infantry," Edison said seriously. Edison said solemnly, and then hung up the communication device. Wu Ming smiled helplessly and put the communication device away. Wu Ming didn't go back to Riverton. Instead, he ran toward Karna, east of Riverton, in the Missouri River Basin. At this moment, two godlike figures were fighting. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several bolts of lightning shot towards the running Karna from the top of Small Hill. Bang, bang. Karna swung his spear and deflected the lightning arrows. The falling bolts exploded on the ground, creating many craters. Then, Karna condensed mana on his spear and swept it toward the small hill in front of him. Crack! Boom! Like cutting vegetables, the small hill in front of Karna was cut in half and then exploded by the mana contained in it. A dark-skinned figure flew up from the small mound, holding a strange bow in his hands. There was no doubt that the arrow that had attacked Karna was shot by him, and it had to be Ajo. Ajo wasn't worried about losing her cover. In the air, Ajo stood upside down and raised her bow. Karna shot a few more arrows. 5 lightning bolts attracted each other and shot toward Karna in the shape of a pentagram. This time, Karna didn't use his gun to knock away the arrows. Instead, he jumped at the moment the pentagon-shaped arrows were shot at him. Boom! The bolts landed on the ground, and the ground exploded. The strong wind blew Karna's white hair. Karna stood up and looked at Ajo, who had landed on the ground. While Karna was dodging the pentagram arrow, Ajona took advantage of the opportunity to flip over and adjust his position before landing steadily on the ground. Karna and Ajo stood opposite each other in the distance, giving off the feeling that they were about to negotiate. But unfortunately, neither Arzu nor Karna had the intention to speak. Ajo raised his bow and shot at Karna crazily with mana bolts. Karna, on the other hand, sprinted toward Ajo, swinging the indestructible blade in his hand to deflect the arrows. From the moment they met, they hadn't said a word and had been fighting the entire time. The surroundings were full of holes from their battle. It was like a natural disaster. That was what Wu Ming thought when he arrived. Seeing the two fighting again, Wu Ming sighed. "That black guy's Ajo?" Wu Ming asked in surprise. Ajo seemed to have heard him and glanced at Wu Ming. However, compared to Wu Ming, Karna seemed to be more attractive to him. Wu Ming smiled awkwardly. After all, he was caught talking bad about Ajo. However, Wu Ming didn't expect Ajo to be a black guy. Wu Ming didn't try to hide his presence. Therefore, not only Ajo, but Karna also noticed Wu Ming when Wu Ming arrived. However, because he was fighting with Ajo, Karna didn't greet Wu Ming. Both of them didn't care about the others around them and only cared about each other. While they were fighting, Wu Ming shook his head and got rid of the thought that Ajo was a black guy. Then, Wu Ming stretched out his hand, and a holy light spear appeared. Mythical Yggdrasil. Whoosh! Along with the sound of a relic being released, Wu Ming threw out a small but bright light needle. Karna and Ajo, who were in the middle of their battle, naturally discovered the needle of light. Furthermore, they sensed a considerable threat from it and hurriedly retreated. Poof! The light needle disappeared as soon as it pierced the ground, leaving a small but bottomless hole and a sound when it pierced the ground. Wu Ming learned this move from the Star Cup's consciousness. By condensing the holy spear, although the attack range was reduced, the power was increased. Otherwise, Karna and Ajo wouldn't have dodged in a hurry. Instead, they would have used their weapons to deflect Wu Ming's light needle. However, the current result was what Wu Ming wanted. Wu Ming didn't want the holy spear to turn into a powerful light cannon. This time, he only used it to interrupt the battle between Karna and Ajo. Wu-ming dashed forward and came to Karna's side. Although Karna and Ajo had separated, their eyes were still fixed on each other. This made Wu-ming wonder if there was some unspeakable gay relationship between the two of them. Can we not fight? Wu-ming didn't ask anything else and just asked this question. After all, they were about to start a war with the Greek forces. It would be difficult for them to lose a top fighter like Karna. I'm afraid not. Ajo and I are mortal enemies. I don't want to fight, but it seems that Ajo wants to defeat me. I'm afraid I can't help you. After hearing Karna's words, Wu-ming looked at Ajo. Wu-ming saw that Ajo's eyes were filled with strong fighting spirit and an incomparably persistent desire. It was obvious that he wouldn't let Karna go. There were only two ways to deal with Ajo. The first was to let Karna and Ajo fight. After all, if Wu-ming forcibly took Karna away, Ajo would definitely chase after him. Since Ajo could join the Celtic side because of Karna, it wasn't impossible for him to join the Greek side because of Karna. The Greek side would definitely warmly welcome a powerhouse who only wanted to fight Karna. While Wu-ming was thinking, Ajo was already impatient. What? You want to fight 2 against 1? Even if that's the case, it doesn't matter. Fight me, Karna. Chapter 524. After Ajo finished speaking, she released her magic in a very imposing manner, causing the surrounding ground to crack. At this moment, Wu-ming finally had a chance to size up Ajona. Although his skin was dark, it revealed an incomparably healthy luster. Dressed in blue and white Indian Brahmin aristocratic clothes, this dark young man was full of character. Plus, he had a cold expression on his face. Wu-ming believed that ordinary girls in the modern world would definitely be smitten by Ajona. Wu-ming looked at Karna as if he had suddenly realized something. Was it because Karna was fairer than Ajona that Ajona was so stubborn about fighting him? I feel like you're thinking about something very rude, Karna said indifferently without even looking at Wu-ming. You're overthinking it, Wu-ming replied awkwardly. Of course he was joking. Wu-ming could understand why Ajona was pestering Karna. They were evenly matched, but because the opponent was in a difficult situation, Ajona, who had once sworn that he would not attack the opponent when the opponent was in a difficult situation, made his move. Even though Ajona's guidance was involved, in the end, Ajona still shot the arrow himself. That was the arrow that ended Karna's life, and also the arrow that would make Ajona suffer for the rest of his life. The hero Ajona had actually wanted to kill his archenemy in a murderous manner. That was too degrading. Although justice always belonged to the victor, Ajona still felt uneasy. Therefore, after turning into a heroic spirit, his wish was to fight Karna and defeat him with his own strength. Wu-ming had also thought it through. Let Karna and Ajona fight. After all, even if Wu-ming took Karna away, they would still end up fighting in the end. As for killing Ajona with Karna, Wu-ming had thought about it before, but first of all, it was inhumane, and second of all, this place was neither close nor far from Chicago. It would cause trouble sooner or later. Then, Wu-ming opened a portal. After exchanging a few words with Karna, Karna nodded. Then, he glanced at Ajo and walked in. Karna, don't even think about escaping. Arzu roared angrily. Don't worry, Achuna. Karna only left the Missouri River Basin. He only went to the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. After all, there are few people there. You won't be disturbed. Then, Wu-ming moved the portal and pushed it in front of Ajo. You can find Karna again through this portal. Of course, you can choose not to trust me. The choice is yours. Wu-ming smiled, indicating that he meant no harm. However, in Ajo's eyes, this smile was extremely evil. He was having a good fight with his opponent, and you sent his opponent running away as soon as you arrived. Now you're even smiling. No matter how you look at it, it's a smile that's asking for a beating. Unfortunately, Wu-ming's charm wasn't as great as Karna's. Ajo merely looked at Wu-ming deeply and then entered the portal. Of course, Wu-ming wouldn't play any tricks. At this moment, Karna and Ajo were indeed in the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. Then, Wu-ming took out his communication device and sent a message to Edison. Karna and Ajo are fighting to the death in the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. You must avoid that place, pass through Denver from the south, and meet up with Chaldea's master in Riverton. After a while, Edison sent back a message. Putting away the communication device, Wuming took Karna's place and continued running toward Chicago. Let the two of them fight it out. By the time the victor is decided, Silent Wonder would have collected all 4 Holy Grails. The sun set in the west, and night gradually fell. Des Moines, a town on the Mississippi plains that was neither too far nor too close to Chicago. Because of the war, there weren't many people in the town. Also, because the sun had just set, there were only a few passers-by on the road. They all had bitter expressions and frowns. Some of the houses were damaged, and some were directly abandoned. No one cared about them. However, because this place was under the influence of Greece, it was relatively peaceful. Suddenly, a green figure flashed past like a shooting star. This made one of the passers-by wonder if he was hallucinating because of his long-term nervousness or if he had run into a ghost. Although the sun had just set, it was still considered night. Not wanting to think about it anymore, the passers-by quickened his pace and left. In every abandoned house in Des Moines, a red-haired young man stood in a house without any light, looking out the window from time to time. This person was Rama. Following the appearance of a green figure, Achilles appeared in front of Rama. "How is it?" Rama asked. "I found out. Those people have all gathered in Chicago because of a big hole in their spaceship. They haven't moved yet," Achilles said, rather displeased. "Speaking of which, we should just attack them directly. Is there need to be so cautious?" Even Spartacus, who had been trying to attack Rama for some unknown reason, was released by Rama for being a hindrance. Well, actually, Rama just let him go with the flow. It would be best if he could affect the Greek side. After what happened before, I understand that if I want to take back Xido, I won't be able to do it rashly. I might even be killed. Rama closed his eyes and explained to Achilles. This was also the reason why Rama asked Achilles to scout for information. But why didn't he go himself? Achilles was the fastest to run. "I deserve to die. However, I can't die. I can't let Xido suffer. I must take back Xido. Before that, I must not die." Rama clenched his fist tightly. The metal gauntlet on his arm made a creaking sound because of Rama's strength. It could be seen how turbulent Rama's heart was. As expected, I still don't know anything about love. Can't we just fight our way through the enemy? Achilles pouted and complained. Even so, Achilles still followed Rama's instructions to scout for information. Sharon had told him that Achilles must listen to Rama's instructions and not charge into the enemy's base alone. As a teacher, Sharon naturally had ways to make his disciple obedient. After all, this was the talent of teacher. After that, Achilles could only grumble helplessly before following Rama over. If that's the case, then what should we do next? Achilles dug his ears and asked Rama. "Attack." Rama paused for a moment and said, "Huh." Achilles suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. Otherwise, there was something wrong with the young king in front of him. Achilles thought, "You must be kidding, brother." Chapter 5:25. Without paying attention to Achilles' expression, Rama explained the reason. "At present, there is no monkey army to help me. The only servants who can fight are you and me. Therefore, attacking is the most reliable method at present." Rama said sadly. When he thought that Xido might have been killed, Rama's heart was full of uneasiness. The young Rama still had the courage to be foolish. After Rama finished speaking, Achilles' forehead showed the word V. "Isn't that the same as my previous proposal?" Achilles thought with a broken heart. Suddenly, a voice came. "I think you'd better wait a little bit." Who is it? Whether it was Achilles or Rama, they took out their weapons and were vigilant. "Don't be nervous." Then, accompanied by an optical camouflage illusion, Wuming's figure appeared in a corner of the dim room. Wuming said that the technology of the Mecha clan was still useful. "It's you." Achilles was quite upset. Then he put down his meteor lance. "The Celtic Saint King." Rama was surprised, but after seeing that it was Wuming, he calmed down. After knowing that Wuming was also a king, although it was a pirated version, Rama's impression of Wu Ming became very good. Of course, a good impression was a good impression, and the fact that Wu Ming injured him could be forgiven. However, Rama still remembered the crime of negligently allowing his men to imprison Sito. Although they reconciled, they still had to remember the grudge. This was the young king Rama's decision in the face of Sito's matter. Rama, who was like a child throwing a tantrum, was not noble. As long as it concerned Sito, then Rama would not give in. Why did you come here alone? Where is the master of Chaldea? After all, he was also Rama's savior, so Rama naturally cared about him. Don't worry, Edison has agreed to join forces with us. On the way back, we have joined forces with Karna to eliminate the Shitendaji who had gathered in Japan. Then, Wu Ming briefly explained to the two of them why Karna was a member of the United States, what they had been doing during this period of time, and their next plan. I didn't expect Lancer to join Edison's camp. Life is really unpredictable. Achilles sighed. In the previous memory, they were clearly teammates, but in the end, they became enemies again. But in any case, because of the alliance, they became teammates again. That person is a hero who gave alms. It's not strange for him to have such decisiveness, Rama said calmly. Although he and Karna did not come from the same story, Rama knew quite a bit about the hero who gave alms. But I didn't expect the heaven-bestowed hero Ajo to appear at this singularity. Rama shook his head. Because of Wu Ming's explanation, the two also knew that Ajona had been fighting Karna all this time. They both sighed with emotion. Not only did Rama temporarily lose a combat power, but he also sighed that these two old enemies who loved and hated each other could appear at this singularity at the same time. That's why this is the Holy Grail. Such a miracle can also happen. Achilles smiled softly, thinking about how he and Sensei appear together. After hearing Achilles' words, Wu Ming smiled. Because of this, Rama, you can also meet Sito at this singularity, just like Karna and Ajo. These were all miracles brought about by the Holy Grail. Rama did not deny it at all and nodded seriously. Although I still can't meet Sito, as long as I know that she's still on this continent, I feel extremely at ease. Because Rama intervened in the Battle of the Monkeys and killed the enemy monkey, the dead monkey's wife put a curse on him. Even if you take back your wife, you can't really meet her. Because of this parting curse, Rama and Sito were separated again in the end, and it was a separation of life and death. This curse still accompanied the two. As long as they were too close to each other, one of them would gradually become weak, faint, and lose power until one of them left. Even if there's a curse, I will definitely find Sito, Rama said angrily. Even with such a curse, Rama still pursued Sito without hesitation, even if it meant death. If that's the case, then you should listen to me and wait for a while. During Wu Ming's explanation, he also told the two of them about the joint attack of the American forces, the lone follower forces, and the Celtic forces on the remaining two forces. If that's the case, I can wait. Anyway, I've been waiting for a day. Rama put away the eternal blade and sat cross-legged on the ground. Tisk, really, both of them are so difficult to understand. Achilles complained as he walked to another room. Wu Ming smiled helplessly, although he asked Ramodi, "By the way, why didn't I see Spartacus?" Wu Ming found Rama and Achilles through mana perception, but Wu Ming didn't find Spartacus mana in the surroundings. Could it be that he was already killed? Wu Ming thought mischievously. That traitor, I've already banished him. Rama answered Wu Ming rather unhappily. Banished? Could it be that Spartacus was attracted by the king follower and attacked Rama, but was then driven away by Rama? Wu Ming looked at Rama's rather unhappy expression and thought that it must be so. Forget it, I'll go find him. I don't want him to ruin my plan. After that, Rama and Achilles continued to stay in Des Moines, while Wu Ming left and embarked on the path to find the traitor. Although Spartacus' dexterity was D, even so, he was much faster than ordinary people. Therefore, he must hurry up and find him, if he was discovered or even captured by the Greek forces. Although it wouldn't cause a big impact, he was afraid that he would be used against Wu Ming and the others. First of all, Wu Ming looked for traces of Spartacus near Chicago. Of course, Wu Ming activated the Triumph armor in the assassin mode, so it wasn't easy to find him. Then he found some traces of Spartacus. Could it be that he was really captured? Wu Ming said helplessly. At this time, Wu Ming suddenly found another mana, which was the mana of someone Wu Ming had seen before. Does this mean that he want me to go there? Wu Ming felt that the other party didn't have the slightest trace of concealment. He speculated that the other party was trying to attract him. Not afraid that it was a trap, Wu Ming quietly moved toward that place. Chapter 526. In just a few seconds, Wu Ming came to a small high ground where a girl with beast ears holding a bow stood there. She seemed to be admiring the moon. After Wu Ming saw the girl with beast ears, he also let go of the unnecessary vigilance in his heart, lifted the magic version of optical camouflage, and slowly walked out of the shadows. Since it's you, I don't think this is a trap, Atlanta. After Wu Ming finished speaking, the girl with beast ears turned around. This person was the famous huntress of Greece, Atlanta. You really believe me? You know I'm a huntress, Saber. Without looking back, Atlanta just closed her eyes and said in a flat tone, Since you call me Saber, then you must have the memory of the battle of the 14 horsemen. I don't think you will repay kindness with ingratitude. Wu Ming chuckled. Indeed, the only saber that Wu Ming had ever served as was Soderic during the battle of the 14 horsemen, which also showed that Atlanta had that memory. And because Wu Ming freed Black Assassin Jack the Ripper, Atlanta owed Wu Ming a favor. It could be said that when the Argo encountered Wu Ming before, Atlanta pretended not to know Wu Ming and did not expose Wu Ming's information, which was considered as returning the favor. However, it did not mean that there was no friendship between the two after the favor was returned. And now, Atlanta contacted Wu Ming, which was the embodiment of this friendship. If you call me over like this, won't it attract Aisen's attention? Although I don't know him, I don't think that guy is very generous. Wu Ming walked to Atlanta's side and looked at the moon side by side. Although Aisen is indeed a useless guy, it is because of this that he will trust me completely and send me out to search the surroundings alone. However, it was also because Atlanta was suitable for investigation that Aisen sent her here. So, in other words, Spartacus was really caught by you. Otherwise, why would he send Atlanta to scout for no reason? Wu Ming really didn't know Aisen, but through historical records, in Wu Ming's opinion, with Aisen's timid temperament, he should keep all his combat power by his side, unless there was a special situation. And Wu Ming didn't think that Atlanta was sent by Aisen. It was Demetrius who spoke to Aisen, so Aisen sent me out. Sure enough, Wu Ming nodded and then continued to ask, So, tell me the specific information about the Greek side. Immediately afterward, Atlanta briefly told Wu Ming about the servants on the Greek side. The leader of the Greek side, or rather, the person who obtained the Holy Grail, was Aisen. Therefore, the Search Argo was Aisen's precious artifact. The other servants on the Greek side were Archer Atlanta, Caster Medea, Berserker Hercules, Lancer Hector, and the captive Archer Zydo. That guy seemed to have told Aisen that as long as he defeated the other forces and seized all 4 Holy Grails, he would be able to establish a country on this land that was separate from human history and would not be burned down by reason. Then, like a fanatic, Aisen began to fight for hegemony, Atlanta said with a disdainful look on her face. He didn't know if she was mocking the Magic King or mocking Aisen for believing the Magic King, who had cheated him so easily. I really don't know what Aisen is thinking. Back at the second singularity, he was already tricked by the Magus King, even though it was with the help of Demetrius. Wu Ming didn't know about this, and Atlanta didn't care whether Aisen was deceived or not, so they stopped talking about this topic. Well, I have understood the specific situation. So, why did you capture Zydo? How could you threaten Rama with this? Isn't it a bit ridiculous? Rama might be controlled by others, but it was impossible for him to completely surrender to Aisen. Moreover, Zydo could take the initiative to die for the people when Rama was old. Perhaps when Aisen threatened Rama with this, Zydo would choose to commit suicide. In short, it was impossible. That guy did have such an idea. Atlanta said helplessly and disdainfully. Oh, I overestimated Ison. Wuming also smiled, but his smile was quite sarcastic. However, you can completely leave Ison's side. Why did you choose to stay? After all, there are not only Greek forces on the mainland. Wuming did not think that Atlanta would stubbornly follow Ison's side. Atlanta was not a good person, but in the face of righteousness, she would not choose to follow Ison's side. Indeed, when I was in Oceanos, I left Ison's Argo, but this time is slightly different. Atlanta shook her head. As a person who once participated in the Argo, when I was summoned by Ison using the Holy Grail, I was bound to his Argo. I can't leave this side. To put it simply, there was a master who didn't have a command seal. But this is not the whole reason. The main point is that Ison has a way to summon the demon god pillar. Wuming frowned. Shitendaji, who held the Holy Grail, also summoned the demon god pillar. Could it be that servants with the Holy Grail could summon the demon god pillar? Then, could Maeve, who held the original Holy Grail of this singularity, also be able to, using the Holy Grail, you can use a servant spiritual base to summon a demon god pillar. But the summoned demon god pillar is more like a possession than a summon. Atlanta continued. Possession? That is to say, the demon god pillar needs to devour a servant to be able to descend? Wuming remembered the Judge Heim, who appeared when he defeated the demon god Shitendaji. He was afraid that the other party used the Judge Heim's spiritual base to summon the demon god pillar. Wuming's guess was right. Shitendaji used the unconscious Judge Heim as a medium to summon the demon god pillar. Because he used the Judge Heim's spiritual base, Shitendaji did not lose consciousness. She used the Holy Grail to split her consciousness in advance. And with the death of the main body as a trigger medium, she used the Judge Heim to summon the demon god pillar and then fused a trace of consciousness in the Holy Grail with the demon god pillar. This was also the reason why the demon god Shitendaji made the sound of the demon god pillar and Shitendaji. Then, Ison captured Cedo. This is also the reason why Ison captured Cedo. If Cedo can't make Roromo submit, then it means that he is useless. Naturally, he can use Cedo to summon the demon god pillar. Atlanta's eyes were evil, as if she was ashamed to be in the same force as Ison. This is the most important reason why I didn't break away from the Greek forces. Chapter 5:27. Compared to breaking away from Greece, isn't it more suitable for you to lurk as an undercover agent? Wuming said for Atlanta. Atlanta nodded and then continued. Because I don't know how to be an undercover agent, I can be regarded as working for Ison wholeheartedly during this time, whether it's capturing Cedo or obeying orders to kill other servants. That was also the reason why Atlanta did not hesitate to place a noble phantasm on Wuming. Since the Argo was destroyed by your shot, Ison has been keeping the Argo in Chicago for the past few days and embedded the Holy Grail in it. With Demetrius' help, the Argo has become a grade A+ noble phantasm. It's more than enough to withstand the attack of a noble phantasm. Wuming smiled when he heard this. He was afraid that Ison was frightened by Wuming's shot, so he installed the Holy Grail directly on the Argo. However, because the Holy Grail was transferred from Chicago to the Argo, the Dragon Teeth soldiers could not be automatically mass-produced. These days, the Dragon Teeth soldiers were made by Demetrius herself. Not only the quality, but also the quantity has decreased a lot. In several battles with Rome, we could be said to be at a disadvantage. Wuming suddenly realized that the Holy Grail still had a lot of drawbacks. It could not mass-produce soldiers on the Argo. But because of this, Ison let me, Hector, and Hercules go to the battlefield together. We killed Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. At present, there are not many Roman servants left. Hearing this, Wuming's eyes lit up. This can be regarded as reducing the burden on us. Immediately afterward, Wuming told Atlanta about their plan to unite the three parties. I didn't expect you to be able to do this. Atlanta looked at Wuming deeply. Becoming the king of the Celts, destroying the Japanese forces, joining the American forces, and attacking Greece and Rome with the lone servant forces led by Master Chaldea. This really shocked Atlanta. If everything goes well, I'm afraid this singularity will be the fastest to solve among these singularities, Atlanta said thoughtfully. Atlanta herself had appeared at the second singularity before, so she naturally knew how quickly Gadotsi had saved the singularity. Based on this, he speculated that the other singularities should be similar. Indeed, counting from the time Li Xiang and the others entered this singularity, I'm afraid it hasn't even been a week. Although Wu Ming did not know how long it took Gadotsi to solve the previous singularities, Roman had told Wu Ming that it had been more than half a year since the anthropogenic fever. In other words, on average, it would take more than a month and a half to deal with a singularity. If all went well, Gadotsi would be able to resolve the singularity in less than a week. That was quite fast. While Wu Ming was thinking, Atalanta paused and spoke. By the way, is it okay to tell me about your chances? Atlanta meant nothing more than in case I'm a spy and deceived you, or accidentally leak your information. However, Wu Ming chuckled and shook his head. It doesn't matter even if you were exposed. After all, our plan is considered an open conspiracy. Gadotsi and the others' first team went to Rome. They did not expect to eradicate Rome, but it was enough to hold them back. Wu Ming and the other second team would attack the Greek forces head-on. Before the attack, the Greek side would definitely notice something, so it did not matter if they were exposed or not. What's more, I don't think Atlanta is that kind of person. I believe that Atlanta, who loves children, no matter how her appearance changes, her inner heart is incomparably beautiful. With that said, Wu Ming reached out and touched Atlanta's beast ears. Because the distance was too close, Atlanta did not dodge and was caught by Wu Ming. Haha. Atlanta was shocked and quickly jumped away. What are you doing, you rude guy? Atlanta blushed, hugged her beast ears, and stammered. Sorry. I've been interested in your beast ears for a long time. It was just a spur of the moment. Wu Ming apologized with a smile, but the hand that was still floating in the air showed that Wu Ming was still thinking about the touch of Atlanta's beast ears. You? Atlanta blushed, gritted her teeth, and gripped the sky bow fiercely. Ahem, I have one more thing to ask of you. Wu Ming coughed and became serious. And it seemed that because Wu Ming had left a good impression on Atlanta, such a simple teasing was not enough to completely collapse the image built in Atlanta's heart. Atlanta touched the beast ears on her head, calmed her face, and nodded. But it was still very popular. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming made 2 runestones on the spot in front of Atlanta, but the runes on the runestones did not look like Lune runes. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming handed the 2 runestones to Atlanta. Hide these 2 runestones close to your body. Don't let Demetrius, the god magician, find them. After all, Kanagami magicians weren't the same as those weak magicians of modern times. Seeing Wu Ming's solemn face, she quickly took it and nodded solemnly. Then, because of the physical contact when she took the runestones, Atlanta blushed again. Even a night could not cover it. After all, there was moonlight. And with the pretentious, serious expression, Atlanta was very cute at the moment. However, Wu Ming also knew that it was business, so he did not tease Atlanta anymore. When Ison wants to use the Holy Grail to summon the demon god pillar, just pour your mana into these 2 runic stones. If possible, the closer you are to the Holy Grail, the better. Of course, I won't force you. Wu Ming instructed in a joking manner. I know. If there is nothing else, I will leave first. After Wu Ming nodded, Atlanta took 2 steps, but for some reason, she stopped again. By the way, Demetrius may have become the master of Spartacus. You know his noble phantasm. That self-explosion is not a joke. After all, Wu Ming and Atlanta both had memories of the battle between the 14 knights. Naturally, they remembered the power of Spartacus' noble phantasm during the battle between the 14 knights. Are you concerned about me? Why don't you let me touch your beast ears again? Wu Ming smiled mischievously. Atlanta's face turned red in an instant, and she quickly left here. After Atlanta left, Wu Ming's mischievous smile disappeared. Looking at the gradually rising moon, Wu Ming always felt uneasy. At this time, Wu Ming found that something was wrong. The sky is not normal. Chapter 528. People said that waiting was the longest, but it was not the case for the servants. After putting away the communication device with Edison, Wu Ming went to the window and looked at the moon. At that moment, the moon had reached the western sky. It should be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Edison told me that they have met up with Tachika and the others and set off for Rome. Wu Ming said to the shadow behind him. Rama and Achilles came out from shadow. Finally, it's going to start fighting. It's very uncomfortable to be here all the time. Achilles bit the bristle grass that he found from God knows where. I'm just as upset as you are. As long as I think about fighting side by side with the Celtic servants, my heart is extremely irritated. Rama put one hand on the eternal blade on his waist, and the other hand clenched his fist. Wu Ming knew what Rama meant. The enemy who imprisoned his wife was now going to rescue his wife with the enemy. Rama's heart must be quite restless. After all, Rama and Wu Ming had reconciled, but he did not reconcile with the other Celtic servants. It could be said that if it were not for Wu Ming's repeated advice and a hint of pleading, Rama, the childish king, would definitely not agree. This time, I'm giving you face. Remember this, Humph? Rama snorted and turned his head. I think you're doing this for the sake of saving your wife. Of course, that sentence could only be thought. Wu Ming did not dare to say it out loud. Otherwise, who knew what kind of trouble this young king would cause? So, when will the Celtic servants arrive here? Achilles asked. Wu Ming smiled slightly. They have arrived. The moon was covered by clouds, and the earth fell into darkness. On the eastern plains outside Chicago, a large shadow moved toward Chicago with the help of the darkness. Atlanta stood on the city wall, her eyes focused. Even a moonless night could not cover the sharp eyes of the huntress. Celtic people, Atlanta said softly as if deep in thought. She then jumped, left the city wall, and returned to the city of Chicago. Without a doubt, she had gone to inform Ison. It's time for me to come out. Defending the city is my specialty. After Atlanta left, a middle-aged man carrying a javelin that was much longer than an ordinary javelin walked to the city wall. Gradually, a gust of wind blew, and the dark clouds in the sky that were blocking the moon were blown away. The moonlight illuminated the land. Countless soldiers with the same face advanced towards the city of Chicago in an orderly manner. Even Hector couldn't tell how many soldiers they had. The only two things that stood out from the rest were the 3 servants with weapons in their hands at the front of the army and the luxurious ox cart pulled by 2 divine bulls in the middle of the army. I didn't expect Queen Maeve to personally come to the battlefield. Hector scratched the back of his head, seemingly feeling helpless about the situation. Even though Greece had always been at war with Rome, it did not mean that they had never fought with the Celts. In fact, what Wu Ming didn't know was that whether it was the Celts, Greeks, or Romans, they had killed or injured each other. However, because it was only a battle between a single servant, the information was not circulated. Of course, from a general point of view, some information that was not so secret was still known. For example, the leader of the Celts was Maeve because she never deliberately hid herself and even publicized it. Therefore, Hector concluded that Maeve must be sitting in the luxurious ox cart. For a woman like Maeve who thought highly of herself, it was natural for her to do such a thing. Of course, Hector didn't know Wu Ming's information. Not to mention that Wu Ming was summoned less than a week ago, Maeve didn't deliberately publicize it. Of course, this was Wu Ming's idea. Then those 2 spearmen must be Celtic warriors. How valiant. They didn't let a single dragon fangs go and quickly ambushed here. I wouldn't do something like that. Hector smiled bitterly as he spoke faintly. Just like what Hector said, Greece's territory was full of dragon fang soldiers, and the Celts were able to sneak into Chicago in the middle of the night without being discovered. This was undoubtedly due to the help of the servants. I really hope it's as simple as defending the city. Uncle is very clumsy about other things. After sighing, Hector began to command the Dragon Fang soldiers to prepare for the enemy's attack. Not far from Chicago, Finn waved his hand, and the entire army stopped in place as if they had received an order. This was the privilege of the Holy Grail's generals. Now, the enemy must have discovered us. The next command will be handed over to the Queen, Dilmund. Finn said lightly, "Yes, my lord. I will go and greet the Queen." Dilmund bowed to Finn and then walked to the rear. Just as Dilmund said, he was ready to welcome the Queen's carriage. To be able to let the army arrive here without being discovered. Your wisdom is really terrifying. Next, it's time to show my bravery. Fergus grinned. Finn had a good impression of this big guy. Well, after all, they were both Celts. Then I'll have to trouble the magic sword envoy to take the lead. In just a moment, the ox cart came from the center of the army to the front line. "Ah, we're here already, Finn. Good job." A noblewoman's voice came from the carriage pulled by the divine ox. "Our army has arrived in Chicago, and the enemy has discovered us. So, when will His Royal Highness, the Holy King, appear?" Finn asked politely. "Your Holy King is on the other side of the city. I can feel it." In the carriage, Maeve took off her white silk gloves and looked at the bright red dragon-like pattern on the back of her hand formed by 3 command seals and smiled. "Then, let's have Fergus break the city gate." "No problem, right?" Maeve said to Fergus outside the carriage. "Of course, no problem. How can a Celtic man say no?" After saying that, Fergus walked forward with the magic sword spiral sword on his shoulder. After the Holy Grail's treatment, Fergus had completely recovered, and now he was full of energy. On the city wall, Hector looked at the man walking forward with the magic sword. He had already guessed what he was going to do. He's going to attack the city with a noble artifact. What a headache. Then, when Hector noticed that Fergus' noble artifact was getting brighter and the magic power was getting thicker, Hector retreated. "Uncle, you can't stop it. This is already a noble artifact that's comparable to a city's noble artifact. Let's escape first." Then a rainbow-colored light exploded after Hector left the city wall. Chapter 529. All right, I feel like I'm full of energy today. I'm sure you'll be satisfied with this shot. Fergus raised his neon sword and laughed. One had to know that the A and A+ were not eye-catching individually, but when they were combined, it was no joke. "Then hurry up. If it wasn't for your relic, I would have asked you to leave earlier." Maeve's impatient voice came from the carriage. Naturally, by leaving the stage, he meant that he had died. "Also, although I don't mind you taking advantage of me verbally, I would be happy to see little Sai kill you." "Oh, my apologies, Your Majesty." "Don't worry. I'm sure His Majesty will be satisfied with this shot." "I hope so." Maeve's lazy voice sounded. The neon sword in Fergus's hand began to glow. Fergus stabbed the neon sword into the ground. Calibulb! In an instant, a rainbow-colored light extended from the neon sword to the city walls of Chicago. Boom! In an instant, a rainbow light burst out of the ground and blasted the city walls of Chicago. Countless Dragonfang soldiers were directly destroyed and turned into dust. Those Dragonfang soldiers that were lucky enough not to be turned into dust were also scattered into small pieces of bone. "Ah-ha-ha-ha! This is truly spectacular." Fergus laughed heartily as he raised the rainbow sword. It had to be said that Fergus was really full of energy. After releasing the relic that doubled his power, he was still in high spirits. Finn and Dilmund watched this scene calmly. After all, this scene was nothing to them. Maeve, who was sitting in her beloved chariot, nodded in satisfaction. Then, she gave an order. "Everyone attack." At this moment, an irrational roar was heard. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. On the west side of Chicago, which was the opposite side of Maeve's army, Wuming, Rama, and Achilles arrived. When the 3 of them arrived, they saw the explosion on the east side of Chicago. "That's the demonic sword envoy's precious artifact," Rama said. "The person who understands a person the best is not his friend, but his opponent." Back then, Rama had fought Fergus to the death for the sake of Cedo. Naturally, he knew about Fergus' noble artifact. That should be the case. Fergus' noble artifact was still vivid in Rama's mind. To be honest, I originally wanted to end that guy directly. At this moment, Wuming spoke. Both Rama and Achilles looked over. If there are no restrictions, he would do as he pleases. For a king, this kind of teammate is very annoying. Wuming smiled coldly. At this moment, Rama and Achilles finally felt the pressure brought about by Wuming. No matter how kind this guy was, he was still a berserker. No matter how close he was to the people, he was still a king. All in all, Wuming was not a kind man. He would not hesitate to do things that would bring him enough benefits. However, Wuming still had his own bottom line. As the origin dragon, Wuming would definitely become 10,000 times more noble than Gaia Aleia in the future. He was destined to never be the same as an ordinary person, which was why he treated everything with reason. That was why people often said that the heavens were heartless. Moreover, have you ever seen Wuming hesitate or worry when he killed someone? Although it was a pity, why would a human feel sad when he crushed an ant to death? That was the reality. Take Nazalik, for example. The people in it were all demons. If it was not for Wuming deliberately suppressing them, they would have been destroyed. However, Wuming would still not do anything to them. Firstly, they were Wuming's subordinates. Wuming had mistakenly entered and became the supreme king. Therefore, he had to be responsible. Secondly, if there was good, there would be evil. Wuming would not purposely punish the evil. Cough, cough. However, if they provoked Wuming, Wuming would not mind getting rid of the weeds. Just like Darius, who wanted to capture Mayu. Other than that, Wuming was more fond of humans. Because Wuming was just adopted by humans, he was a human for a period of time. Therefore, he was more fond of humans, especially those who were considered good by Wuming. If he had the ability, Wuming would definitely help. Rick was a good example. Wuming specially went to Rick's world and helped the humans to turn the situation around. If possible, Wuming still liked to stay with humans, because the possibilities and emotions of humans made Wuming very happy. And Wuming wanted to kill Fergus. Well, regarding this point, Wuming only wanted to kill Fergus because he had flirted with Maeve before. But no matter what, he is still my subordinate. It is better to keep him alive. Just like that, the topic ended. Let's go. Maeve has already started. We can't fall behind. Saying that, the three of them walked towards the west wall of Chicago. Wuming started to move. On Maeve's side, there was a small problem. Hercules let out a confused roar as he swung his axe and sword at Fergus. Bang! The ground that was hit by Hercules cracked. As for Fergus, he naturally dodged this attack. Hey, why are you attacking me directly? You think too highly of me. Although Fergus was still running his mouth, his expression had become serious. Fergus was also holding the neon sword with both hands. Dillman, be careful. This big guy is not to be trifled with. Finn held his spear and looked warily at Hercules, who had pulled out his axe and sword from the ground. Yes, my lord. Dilmod also raised his red and yellow spears and stood beside Finn. My brave warriors. Maeve didn't even walk out of the carriage. With just one sentence, countless Wuming-faced soldiers rushed towards Hercules. However, even if they were strengthened by the Holy Grail, the small fries were still small fries. For a great hero like Hercules, they were basically useless. Hercules roared at the sky. Even if he didn't have magic to release this skill, the roar mixed with magic alone was enough to shock the nearby soldiers to death. Then, Hercules rushed into the crowd of soldiers and began a massacre. At this moment, Hercules could only be described with 4 words. Unparalleled mowing. Accompanied by a roar, a drill-like spiral sword attacked Hercules from behind. Clang! Hercules easily blocked Fergus' attack with his axe and sword and slapped Fergus away. With the mind's eye skill, Hercules naturally wouldn't be ambushed successfully. This is a little tricky. Fergus stabilized himself as he flew away and broke out in cold sweat. When Fergus was sent flying, Finn and Dilmond also rushed forward. With the two of them together and their flexibility as spearmen, they could slightly restrain Hercules. However, they still couldn't cause much damage to Hercules. Let's release the noble artifact again. With that, Fergus raised his magic sword. However, at this moment, a rather deranged voice was heard. Ah, oppressor! Oppressor! Chapter 530. In the west of Chicago, because Maeve was attracting attention in the east of Chicago, Wooming's side was relatively smooth. Nay dash, Achilles stopped his chariot, and the three immortal horses that pulled the chariot snorted. On the city wall, there was no one. All of them were Dragon Fong soldiers. Now, these Dragon Fong soldiers had all fallen to the ground and turned into ashes. Even my chariot can't stop them. Sure enough, the small fries are not interesting. There was no doubt that these were all done by Achilles, who had just stopped the chariot. Besides, Achilles also descended as a rider. Achilles' chariot was still too strong for these Dragon Fong soldiers, or rather, the Dragon Fong soldiers were too weak. What's more, these Dragon Fong soldiers were likely to be made by Demetrius, not the enhanced version of the Dragon Fong soldiers mass-produced by the Holy Grail. Immediately afterward, Wooming and Rama got off the chariot. The two finally experienced the thrill of racing an ancient chariot. At this time, an arrow emitting turquoise magic power shot over. Bang dash! Rama held the indestructible blade and deflected the arrow with a level strength. The three of them looked at the roof of the house not far away, and Atalanta was aiming her bow here. That is, big sister. Achilles' expression darkened. After all, when he was in the 14th Rider, he had a good relationship with Atalanta, and Achilles didn't really want to attack Atalanta. Oh, really? Why are there so many people tonight? I don't have the energy to entertain you all. A voice that was more boring than Roman came. Hector, carrying his long javelin, appeared from the shadows of the city. Hector. This was Achilles' second surprise after Atalanta. He didn't expect it to be someone related to him. In the famous Trojan War, Hector's defense was invincible, and the enemy was defeated. The Trojan side was not far from victory. After that, Achilles went to the battlefield to fight Hector one-on-one. Although Hector broke his immortality, Hector still lost. As a result, the Trojan side gradually lost. It could be said that if there was no Achilles, Hector would not die, and he would not fall into the Trojan horse trap, and the Trojan side would probably win. But there were no ifs, and now, the two old rivals of the Trojan War were reunited here. Isn't this Achilles? I didn't think that we would become enemies again. Sure enough, the Holy Grail is really a magical thing. Hector didn't think that he would be able to see Achilles, and he was also shocked. I'll deal with this guy. Achilles said to Wooming and Rama rider, riding on his meteor chariot. Said chariots, said chariot, but said chariot, said chariot, said chariot, said chariot, said chariot, said chariot, said chariot. He said chariot, and said he said said, although said, of said. Although Hector did not think that Atalanta could defeat the remaining two servants, he did not think that she would be able to defeat them. In Hector's opinion, the remaining two servants were not weaker than Achilles. However, Archer Atalanta just nodded indifferently and did not say anything. After Hector left, Rama pointed the undying blade at Atalanta. Then, let me deal with this archer, Romo said confidently. Wooming knew that after the mana crystal healed Rama, a huge amount of mana was still stored in Rama's body. Just like how Fergus had an excess of energy after being healed by the Holy Grail, Rama was the same now. Then, under Rama's eager expression, Atalanta put down the bow. Serene, Ison is preparing to escape. Then, two gasps of surprise came from Wooming and Romo. Sigh. The southern city of the Missouri River Valley, Alexandria, camp of the Roman forces. Romulus looked at the Roman soldiers who were fighting against the incoming mechanical troops with a serious face and did not say anything. Lord God, a blonde girl in a white wedding dress walked to Romulus' side. It seems that the masters of Chaldea have joined forces with the native forces of the United States. Very good. In this way, Rome will be protected. Romulus nodded and said excitedly. However, Nero did not understand what his god was talking about. My sons, Caesar, Caligula, have left. Now, all of our servants, Rome, have left. Romulus said to the pure bride, who asked Rome to summon emperors this time. How mysterious would the emperors be? It was expected that they would leave. I will protect Rome until I die. The girl said to the god ancestor in a tone of farewell. My son, if I, Rome, also leave, then destroy the Holy Grail. Romulus said, but, God, isn't that the existence that is suppressing her? If we destroy the Holy Grail, won't she be released? The girl said worriedly, compared to becoming the demon god pillar, I, Rome, think that we should choose to release her. As he said that, Romulus put his hand on the girl's head. If Rome, is gone, there is no need to stop her. Moreover, she is also on our side, my son Nero. I understand, Lord God. Then they realized that instead of attacking, the mechanical troops seem to be trapping them here. It seems that something we don't know has happened, my son. My son, welcome them in. In the west of Chicago, the battle between Achilles and Hector caused a lot of magic to explode. It was as bright as the light in the night. However, Wooming and Romulus did not pay attention to that. In short, that archer is actually on our side. Romulus looked at Atlanta, who left, and asked Wooming rather unhappily. He wanted to fight for a long time. In the end, he finally met an enemy that he thought he could fight, but it turned out to be a spy on his side. In short, it's a good thing to subdue the enemy without fighting. Wooming smiled and patted Romulus on the shoulder, indicating that he was more open-minded. Of course, I understand that, Romulus said unhappily. Then, next, we need to wait, right? Wooming walked to the edge of the city wall and said jokingly, we can also watch Achilles fight Hector to relieve our boredom. Wooming showed a mischievous smile. Romulus was speechless. Chapter 531. Oppressor. Spartacus laughed wildly and used his seemingly ordinary iron sword to madly charge into the crowd of soldiers. At this moment, Maeve had already retreated to the back of the soldiers, or it should be said that the soldiers were constantly moving forward. Maeve, who hadn't moved, fell behind the soldiers. If one paid close attention, they would discover that Spartacus was advancing towards Maeve. If Wooming was here, it wouldn't be strange. After all, Spartacus liked to attack the so-called oppressors that he spoke of the most. In other words, it was normal for him to attack Maeve. I can't let you pass, Berserker. At this moment, a tall man with a spiral sword stood in front of Spartacus. It was Fergus, who had been sent flying by Hercules. Because Finn and Dilmond had gone to restrain Hercules, Fergus was the only one facing this mad dog. What? Why did Maeve make a move? If the emperor had to make a move, then what was the use of a general? Are you also an oppressor? Oppressor. Give me more oppression. Spartacus laughed loudly, no longer caring about the other soldiers, and charged towards Fergus. Although it was very short, Fergus had been a king before, so it wasn't strange that he could attract Fergus' attention. Clank! The magic sword and the ordinary iron sword collided, producing an ear-piercing sound. It was hard to imagine that Spartacus's ordinary iron sword could not break after colliding with a magic sword. Spartacus was like a mad dog as he punched Fergus without any pattern. Fergus was a Celtic warrior, a member of the Red Branch Knights, and also wielded a magic sword. Naturally, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage in a fight against the leader of the rebels, Spartacus. If one only looked at his appearance, Spartacus was about to be killed by Fergus. However, Fergus discovered that even if Spartacus' body was seriously injured, this berserker was getting more spirited as he fought. No, it should be said that the more injured he gets, the more spirited he gets. TSK, I hate this kind of guy with super high durability. Fergus was rather unhappy. Spartacus' body was already injured. His right arm was almost detached from his body, and there was a big hole in his abdomen and heart by the neon sword. There were many half-meter-long wounds on his body, and even half of his head was smashed in. The wounds on Spartacus' head and heart were the wounds. When Fergus saw that Spartacus was getting more spirited, he directly attacked these two places. However, Fergus didn't affect Spartacus. Fergus even noticed that Spartacus's wounds were healing, and Spartacus mutated. Spartacus, whose body had begun to change, gradually blocked Fergus' attacks and began to counterattack. Berserker can't be killed. Fergus is as Fergus was. Fergus took a few steps back and was ready to use his noble relic to kill Berserker in one go. Ah ha 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 ha! Ah ha ha! Oppressor! Come, give me even more pressure! However, Spartacus didn't give Fergus a chance. He was really like a mad dog, entangling with Fergus. In the face of a berserker like Spartacus, who had so many crazy skills, pure magic and physical attacks were basically useless against Spartacus. This was all thanks to Spartacus' noble phantasm and skills. The glory of being abused. B+, when the magician healed Spartacus, the amount of magic consumed was a quarter of the original amount. The more serious the attack, the more spirited Spartacus was until he brought out all his hidden strength. After a certain period of time, the injuries would be gradually healed. Unyielding will. No matter what kind of pain and despair he faced, he would not give in. An extremely strong will could obtain physical and mental endurance. Roar of the defective beast, crying warmonger. A part of the damage received from the enemy can be converted into magic and stored in the body. The efficiency of the conversion of magic will increase as Spartacus' physical strength decreases. The magic accumulated in the body can be used to enhance Spartacus' ability. It could be said that Spartacus was on the same level as Hercules in terms of tenacity. Of course, it was only in terms of tenacity. Currently, there were only two ways to deal with Spartacus. The first way was to wait for Spartacus' noble phantasm to activate and self-destruct. The second method was to use the instant kill ability of the demon eyes of death perception to directly ignore everything and kill Spartacus. Of course, if one had the ability to directly destroy Spartacus' body, it could be said that he was killed instantly. Currently, Spartacus had not accumulated enough magic to self-destruct. However, Fergus had a noble phantasm that was enough to destroy 3 mountains. However, Fergus did not know about this. Moreover, his noble phantasm might not be able to kill Spartacus instantly. Fergus wanted to release his noble phantasm, but at the moment, Fergus was trapped by Spartacus, who was changing rapidly. In terms of attributes, other than Spartacus' durability being higher than Fergus, the rest of Spartacus' ability points were either the same or lower than Fergus. Coincidentally, Spartacus' agility was 2 levels lower than Fergus. Fergus also discovered this in the following battle with Spartacus. Therefore, after a few rounds of fighting with Spartacus, he used his skills to trip Spartacus and get behind him. Then, he took the opportunity to distance himself from Spartacus. Huh, oppressor? Spartacus got up from the ground and shook his head. He then found Fergus, who was not far behind him. Then, Spartacus excitedly raised his iron sword and rushed towards Fergus. Spiral, get ready. Fergus calmly raised his neon sword as he looked at Spartacus, who was running towards him. Fergus shook his head helplessly as he looked at Spartacus, who was 5 meters tall and had accumulated mana due to his injuries. It's my misfortune to be able to meet you. Indeed, as an enemy, Spartacus was an incomparable headache because he couldn't be killed by ordinary means. Well, even as an ally, he was a headache. All in all, Fergus had had enough. He wanted to end this berserker completely. Fergus focused all his mana into the neon sword and even began to overdraw his spiritual base. After all, Fergus mana was E. Fergus was afraid that he could not kill this thing. Taste the real neon sword. Just like Ibaraki Duji's noble phantasm, the neon sword emitted its last colorful light. Even Hercules, Finn, and Dilmun stopped fighting. Maeve was at the back of the army, did the same. The 4 of them turned their attention to Fergus and Spartacus. Ah! Oppressor! Oh! The light covered the ground. Chapter 532. Boom! The sound of a nuclear explosion came from the east of Chicago, and the storm raged. Wuming and Rama both stabilized their bodies and squinted at the scene filled with sand and dust. After Atlanta left, Wuming and Rama did not really go to watch the classic duel between Achilles and Hector. Instead, they ran along the edge of Chicago toward the Celtic army in the east of the city. In the end, before they could even reach the Celtic army, a violent explosion occurred. The power of the explosion was so great that it even completely destroyed the east wall of Chicago, giving people the feeling that there were no walls in the east of Chicago. Of course, whether it was Denver, Alexandria, or Chicago, there were no such things like ancient walls. All of them were built by various forces during this period of time. Wuming and Rama looked at each other, and the two quickly ran forward. Because of the strong hurricane caused by the big explosion, there was basically no sand and dust around, so the scene could be said to be clear to Wuming and Rama at a glance. In front of the two of them was a huge crater of nearly 100 square kilometers, but because it was too big, they could only estimate, but it was definitely more than 50 square kilometers. The depth of the crater was needless to say. The distance between the deepest part of the crater and the ground was about 50 meters, and maybe it was even deeper. Wuming thought that if such a crater fell on Earth, humans would probably end up like the dinosaurs. The ground on the edge of the crater was unusually smooth, and there were no impurities. It was completely the product of the downward compression of the soil by the explosion. In the center of the crater, there was a lake full of water, and the lake water was still rising. East of Chicago was Lake Michigan. At this moment, such a big explosion directly connected this huge crater to Lake Michigan. There were no traces of soldiers or servants on the scene, and Wuming's perception was temporarily disabled. There is no doubt that the army brought by Maeve was directly blown into ashes by the explosion. As for the servants who were fighting here, they were probably in danger. Wuming frowned. He was a little worried about Maeve. Even if the servants were killed, they would just retreat to the martyr's palace. However, Wuming was still worried. Because the air here was full of chaotic magic, Wuming's perception was also disturbed by these chaotic magic. It was not that he could not perceive anything, but the difficulty of perception was greatly increased. This terrible explosion, which powerful servant's noble phantasm, is it? Rama said with lingering fear. Even he did not have the confidence to say that he could survive the explosion that covered an area of nearly 100 square kilometers. After all, a servant was much stronger than an ordinary person, but without a defensive noble phantasm or skills, they would also directly leave. If he did not have the golden armor, he would have to use of his noble phantasm. He would have to use his noble phantasm to survive. Of course, if Rama released his noble phantasm, he would be able to survive. Even if he did not die, he would die. He would be dead at least, he would be dead. All in all, if that was really the case, Rama would definitely not feel good. After Rama finished speaking, Wuming sighed. I'm afraid that except for Maeve, all the servants present have left. After all, this explosion was in the Celtic army. Not to mention that the army was completely wiped out. Wuming still could not find any servants. As for why Wuming knew that Maeve was fine, it was because Wuming was worried about her. Wuming's master was Maeve, so naturally, there was a contractual connection between them. Wuming naturally knew whether Maeve had left or not. Previously, by relying on this connection, Wuming knew that Maeve had come to Chicago. Suddenly, Rama said, "What is that?" Rama pointed to the lake below the giant pit that was still rising. Wuming followed Rama's gaze. In the middle of the lake, a large rock that was emitting red light floated up. However, Wuming always felt that the stone with red light was so familiar. Oh my God, that was not a stone with red light. It was clearly Hercules who was activating the 12 trials, God Hand. It was said that Spartacus was difficult to deal with, but compared to Hercules, it was simply insignificant. Hercules' 12 trials, God Hand, could be said to be a real resurrection. Even if his head was chopped off or his whole body was crushed, as long as the noble phantasm was activated, Hercules' whole body would be like steel that was just out of the furnace, emitting red light, and began to reconstruct his body. Not to mention, it would also increase the resistance of the cause of death. Hercules was the real difficult to deal with. Wooming fought for a whole day to retrieve Hercules' Berserker class card. In Winterwood City, the new Seven Knights and the Dark King Arthur had to work together to kill Hercules. From this, one could see how tenacious Hercules was. Fortunately, Hercules was a berserker. Otherwise, if Hercules knew how to use his brain, it would be a disaster. In an instant, Wooming flew up and rushed to Hercules, who was still recovering his body. Rama did not stop Wooming. In Rama's opinion, facing an enemy, one should be ruthless, not to mention that this was a servant from Greece. However, this would disappoint Rama. Wooming would not waste his effort to kill Hercules. Not to mention how difficult it was to kill him. Moreover, now was not the time to waste on him. The reason why Wooming rushed to Hercules was to trap him. Wooming arrived above Hercules. Along with the crisp sound of chains, several pseudo-heavenly locks were taken out by Wooming and tied to Hercules. Heavenly locks targeted servants with divinity, and Hercules' divinity was as high as a class. However, Wooming was very clear about one thing. Even if heavenly locks could only trap Hercules for a short time, heavenly locks were only able to suppress Hercules. The stronger the divinity, the tighter the heavenly locks would be. However, Hercules' strength was as high as a plus. In Wooming's opinion, Hercules was fully capable of breaking the heavenly locks. In that case, let alone these pseudo-heavenly locks. However, Wooming was only holding on to the idea of stalling for time. Subsequently, Wooming took out a lot of pseudo-heavenly locks that were stored in his noble phantasm. He only left one pseudo-heavenly lock and tied the rest to Hercules. In this case, it would take a long time to use only his strength. Wooming looked at the chain mummy in front of him and nodded as if he was very satisfied with his work of art. Subsequently, Wooming buried Hercules in the huge pit, which could be said to be the bottom of the lake. After that, Wooming and Rama looked for Maeve. Well, first of all, they had to ignore Rama's gaze. Chapter 533. Wooming searched along the edge of the crater and soon found Maeve. After all, Wooming could feel from the contract that Maeve was not hurt at all. That meant that she was not in the range of the explosion just now. At the very least, she was not hurt. Naturally, she was outside the crater. With Wooming and Rama's acceleration, it was easy for them to go from the edge of the crater to the other side. It only took them a few minutes. At that moment, the celestial bull that was pulling Maeve's carriage had fallen to the ground. It seemed that it was affected by the explosion. The carriage that was originally gorgeous and dignified had become a little tattered. However, at least it did not seem to be damaged internally. Rama came to the front of the celestial bull and squatted down to check on the two celestial bulls. Wooming was slightly stunned when he saw that. Then he recalled something. It seemed like Rama was quite a caring big boy. At that moment, Maeve suddenly flew out of the carriage. That's right. She flew out and landed in Wooming's arms. Wooming wondered how Maeve could fly into Wooming's arms in a straight line. Wouldn't you fall because of gravity? Newton was about to cry. In short, Wooming hugged Maeve, who was flying toward him. Little sigh, you're finally here. You almost couldn't see me. Maeve looked at Wooming pitifully. Of course, if Maeve changed her smile into a cry, the effect would be better. This must be your wife, Celander. I'm really envious. Romo stood up and looked at the couple who were hugging each other lovingly. He was filled with emotion. Rama was naturally envious of the couple who could be together. It was unlike him and Sito, who could not see each other because of the curse. However, Wooming was very helpless. How could you tell that this was a loving hug? It was obviously my Fu who suddenly flew out, and I subconsciously hugged her, okay? However, since he had accepted Maeve, a hug was nothing. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Speaking of which, Maeve, what's going on here? Wooming asked. On the other hand, Rama was all ears. After all, such a huge explosion was very attractive. This is what happened. Maeve began to tell the story. After Fergus broke the city gate, Hector left while Hercules appeared. Finn and Dilmaud held Hercules back. However, Spartacus appeared and Fergus and Spartacus went against each other. Maeve, of course, was to watch the battle. Following that, there was no progress in the battle between Hercules, Finn, and Dilmawd. It was just a back-and-forth exchange of blows. Although Finn and Dilmawd couldn't defeat Hercules in a one-on-one fight, the two of them were able to fight Hercules to a draw for the time being. As for the battle between Fergus and Spartacus, it was a one-sided battle. Wooming felt that something was wrong. He knew the effect of Spartacus' noble phantasm. Soon after, Fergus saw that Spartacus was getting more and more spirited as he fought. Spartacus had transformed into a 5-meter-tall monster. Moreover, he was still transforming into a monster. Fergus decided to activate his relic immediately. Then, Spartacus exploded. Wooming shook his head bitterly. As expected, nothing good ever came out of this guy's capture. Rama tilted his head awkwardly. It was his fault. However, the young Rama king would never admit his mistake. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. As Maeve was the furthest away and had the protection of the ox cart, she was not hurt. However, the two divine bulls were in trouble. These two divine bulls were not Achilles' immortal horses. Now, all their bones were broken and they were about to leave the stage. Fortunately, it was a noble phantasm, so they did not have to worry too much about it. After Wooming and Rama arrived, Maeve removed the noble phantasm. The divine bulls and the ox cart turned into mana particles and disappeared. Is Berserker's noble phantasm that powerful? Rama asked. It was normal for a powerful heroic spirit to have a powerful noble phantasm. However, Spartacus was just a rebellious gladiator. To put it bluntly, he was just a rebellious slave. Moreover, he was a slave who did not succeed in his rebellion and was quickly executed. No matter how one looked at it, such a person should not have such a powerful noble phantasm. He might be an exception. However, I've seen his noble phantasm before. Even if it exploded, it wouldn't be this powerful. Wooming put Maeve down from his arms, ignoring her dissatisfied expression. Then, Wooming looked at the lake behind him that was about to be filled. However, with Master's 3 command incantations and Fergus' noble artifact charging Spartacus, it's not hard to imagine how much damage it could cause. Although almost 100 square kilometers was huge, if Karna and Wooming were to fight, thousands of square kilometers of land could be affected. That was also the reason why Wooming had asked Karna and Zhou to fight in the northwest part of the Cordillera Mountains. There were fewer people there, and it was far away from the battlefield. Otherwise, they would be affected by the battle. Command spells, noble phantasm, charging. Rama and Maeve repeated Wooming's words. That's right. Wooming nodded his head. Spartacus' noble phantasm, crashing warmonger, is a permanent noble phantasm. It can convert the damage it receives into mana and store it in its body. It can increase its ability value and change its body. Finally, when a mana is full, it will self-destruct and launch a destructive impact. After explaining, Wooming paused and thought for a while. I think Demetrius must have used the command incantation to give the command to unleash the greatest power of the noble phantasm 3 times. It strengthened Spartacus' noble phantasm. In addition to Fergus' continuous attacks and the overcharging of Spartacus' noble phantasm, it caused Spartacus to reach the critical point and self-destruct before it could transform into a monster. Rama and Maeve thought for a while and realized that this was the most suitable explanation for the current situation. However, I think Fergus' noble phantasm had a huge impact on the situation here. Maeve smiled. What do you mean? Wooming asked. Maeve then told Wooming about the neon sword that seemed to have been infused with all its power. Does that mean it's the same as Ibaraki Duji? Wooming touched his chin. It seems like they've all left the battlefield. Needless to say, Fergus was the closest to Spartacus and was designated to leave the battlefield. As for Finn, Dilmawd, and even Hercules, they had spent a lot of time repairing their bodies. It was likely that the two of them had also been forced out of the battlefield during the explosion. Don't we need to care about Hercules? Rama asked. He knew that Wooming did not kill Hercules. He only tied Hercules up and buried him. Don't worry about that guy for now. He's no different from leaving the battlefield. Wu Ming waved his hand. After all, it was not easy for Hercules to break free from the pseudo-skylock that was almost the same as the real skylock. Just when Wu Ming was about to check on Achilles, a dark purple ripple suddenly appeared. Chapter 534. The portal has been activated? Wu Ming was shocked. That's right, this was Wu Ming's portal. There's no time to explain. Come in quickly, Wu Ming said as he rushed into the portal. That's right, he rushed in. It was obvious how anxious Wu Ming was. Romo seemed to have thought of something and quickly rushed in as well. Maeve looked at the two of them rushing in. She blinked her eyes and walked in gracefully. Then, the portal closed. After passing through the portal and arriving on the other side, Maeve found herself in the belly of a ship. Then, a rather strange scene appeared before Maeve's eyes. Wu Ming was holding the Holy Grail in one hand and a spear in the other. He placed the spear on the neck of a yellow-haired guy whose face was pale with fright. Next to the yellow-haired guy was a girl with pinkish-purple hair. She was holding a magic wand with a nervous expression. The beast-eared girl with green hair was aiming an arrow at the girl's head. If the girl with the magic wand made any strange movements, May believed that the beast-eared girl's arrow would definitely pierce through her head. Behind Wu Ming was Romo. However, at this moment, Romo was holding a girl who looked almost exactly like him. Rama's face was filled with nervousness as he kept calling out names like Cedo, Cedo. However, from the looks of it, Romo seemed to be unable to see the girl at all. He was like a blind person who could only rely on touch. However, from the looks of it, there seemed to be a problem with Romo's perception. Although on the surface, Romo could accurately touch Cedo, at this moment, Romo gave off the feeling that he was touching air. As for the girl who seemed to be called Cedo, she was already unconscious. This made my Fu daydream. If that girl was me, would Xiao Sai be as anxious as she is? This was a girl's heart. However, Wu Ming was not paying attention to Maeve at the moment and did not know what she was thinking. Wu Ming was only paying attention to the yellow-haired guy. In any case, you're someone who entered the Martyr's Palace. Can't you have a little backbone? With that, Wu Ming rubbed the tip of his spear on Aisen's neck. However, Wu Ming's result was Aisen's howl. Squeak, squeak. Aisen's face turned pale and his hands were still trembling. Don't kill me, Aisen said in a trembling voice. Looking at Aisen in such a state, Medea or Lily looked at Aisen with worry and disappointment. Sir Aisen, after seeing such a traitorous witch, Wu Ming finally understood why Medea, who was abandoned by Aisen, would choose to follow him again. Because Medea was in the form of a girl's dream of a girl. Wu Ming shook his head. A guy like that was not worth his time. However, Wu Ming still did not lower the tip of his spear from Aisen's neck. Then, Wu Ming turned to look at Rama. Rama, can't you sense Cedo? Wu Ming frowned. Although he had learned about the so-called curse from Rama, he did not expect the curse to be so powerful. Now, not to mention not being able to see, even the contact between the two of them, and even their own perception had become erroneous. This curse of never being together was not just for show. He did not know how a female monkey could place such a curse on Rama and Cedo. That's right. Even if Cedo and I were to hug each other, we would not be able to see or sense each other. Rama no longer referred to himself as you. At this moment, Rama was like a person who was chasing after hope. In the end, he realized that the hope was despair. Once Cedo and I get too close, one of our powers and presence will gradually fade until they leave. Tears rolled down Rama's cheeks. As for which party would disappear, there was no doubt that it would be the weaker party. Wu Ming recalled the scene when he came back through the portal released by Atlanta. At that time, Cedo was not restrained by any chains. However, there was no guarantee that Medea's magic did not restrict her. However, even so, Cedo could not stand up at that time, as if she was severely injured. At that time, Wu Ming sensed that Cedo's magic power was insufficient, or rather, it was severely lacking. At this moment, looking at the many injuries on Cedo's body, as well as the faintly discernible signs of his spirit base disappearing. How could Wu Ming not know what was going on? From being imprisoned on Alcatraz Island to this Argo. Until now, Cedo had been in a state of abuse. That we did not do anything to Miss Cedo. Please believe us. Lord Ison only wanted to use Miss Cedo as a hostage, Medea said weakly. If that was the case, the injuries on Cedo's body were caused before he was captured on Argo. It was not unreasonable. It was common for the Celts to beat people half to death when they captured them, and they did not have the habit of healing their captives. In other words, Beowulf did not know how to heal at all, and he did not realize that he should heal Cedo. In short, that guy was dead. Let's not care about him. Then, Wu Ming felt that something was wrong. Medea was the disciple of the goddess of magic, Hecate. She had many healing methods, so why didn't she heal Cedo? However, Medea seemed to have seen through Wu Ming's question and answered it in advance. Miss Cedo has always refused me to heal her, and she said something like, even if I die, I don't want to be a burden to Lord Rama. As if recalling the scene when Cedo said those words, Medea was a little depressed. She also wanted to sacrifice herself for the people she loved like Cedo did. But Ison, while Medea was distracted, Wu Ming frowned in distress. However, he began to laugh bitterly in his heart. So, if the other party did not want to heal, wouldn't you forcefully heal her? How gentle are you? However, if I didn't see wrongly, Ison wanted to use Cedo and the Holy Grail to summon the demon god Pillar. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at Ison, who was so frightened that he could not speak. When Wu Ming said those words, Rama instantly raised his head with anger in his eyes. Rama was slower than Wu Ming by a bit. When he arrived, Wu Ming had already seized the Holy Grail and restrained Ison and Medea with Atlanta. It was also Rama's arrival that caused the extremely weak Cedo to fall into a coma. Following Wu Ming's instructions, Rama stumbled and found Cedo through Cedo's position that was left in his eyes. However, it did not work. Rama could not see Cedo at all, nor could he touch Cedo. However, he did not give up and kept calling out Cedo's name. How could a man who loved his wife not be enraged when he found out that his wife had almost been used as a sacrifice? Bang! Chapter 535. Bang! Wu Ming moved his spear away from Ison's neck and blocked Rama's indestructible blade. Under the blade of the indestructible blade was Ison, who was paralyzed on the ground. However, Demetrius, who made a little movement, was stopped by Atlanta's arrows. Calm down, Rama. Wu Ming tried to persuade Rama gently. You want me to calm down? The guy who almost turned Cedo into a demon god Pillar is right in front of me. How can I calm down? Rama's eyes were burning with flames as he stared at Ison fiercely, as if he wanted to eat Ison alive. We are friends, right? If so, listen to my advice. Ison is still useful, so don't kill him for the time being. Otherwise, Wu Ming, who had already snatched the Greek Holy Grail, would have already made his move. Rama looked at Wu Ming and nodded. He then continued to stare at Ison fiercely. Maeve, please do me a favor. Wu Ming waved at Maeve, who looked like she was watching a family drama. Yes. Maeve smiled and came to Wu Ming's side. After that, Wu Ming took out a lot of healing potions from his precious artifact space. He then opened the teleportation door and let Maeve bring Cedo away for the time being. After all, if Cedo stayed with Rama any longer, he would disappear soon. After Wu Ming told Maeve about various things, Maeve carried Cedo into the teleportation door. Thank you very much, Holy King. No, surrender. Rama said sincerely to Wu Ming. It was an eye-opener for Wu Ming to be able to make the proud and arrogant Rama, who often threw tantrums, apologize so sincerely. Since you were able to call me by my name, it means that we are friends, right? As he spoke, Wu Ming placed the Holy Grail into the golden ripple under Ison's gaze. He then extended his hand to Rama. Although Wu Ming treated Rama as a friend when Reeve shook hands with Rama, he did not expect that. Yes, that's right, my friend. Then, Rama and Wu Ming held each other's hands tightly. Then, don't attack Ison for the time being, all right? Wu Ming glanced at Ison, causing Ison to shuffle backwards in fright. After all, Ison was currently sitting on the ground. Sure, after all, this person had saved his wife, Sidwa. Moreover, this person was also his friend. Thus, Rama would naturally listen to him. As Rama spoke, he glared at Ison and no longer looked at him. Otherwise, the anger in his heart would not dissipate. Although Rama had promised Wuming to spare Ison's life for the time being, he wasn't the kind of person who would forgive someone who almost sacrificed his wife. It was also because of Wuming's face. Otherwise, even if Gadatsi was here, with Rama's childish temper, he would have used the indestructible blade to slash Ison. Yes, the kind that even their own mother wouldn't be able to recognize. So, Ison, now you are our captive. Wuming smiled and narrowed his eyes, which made Ison and even Demetrius feel a chill. In the sky, the Argo was moving towards Alexandria. On the Argo, Ison was controlling the Argo alone at the helm. If one didn't look at Ison's livid face and Atlanta behind him, who was holding the heavenly bow and staring at Ison as if he was her prey, then Ison's situation was not that bad. Demetrius, who was originally following Ison, was at the bow with Wuming and Rama, explaining the current situation of the Greek side. In short, after sending out Hercules, Hector, and the captive Spartacus, we only have Ison, Atlanta, and me left. Wuming did not look at Demetrius. He just looked ahead as if he was experiencing the feeling of flying in a boat. As for Rama, he sat cross-legged alone on the deck behind Wuming and Demetrius with his eyes closed, as if everything had nothing to do with him until they reached their destination, Alexandria. This was Wuming's purpose. Through Ison, he drove the Argo to Gadatsi and others' gathering place, Alexandria. At this moment, only Rome was left on this continent, and it was now being restrained by Gadatsi and others. This time, the battle against Greece was also messed up because of Spartacus' self-destruction. Although Finn, Dilmund, and Fergus had all left the stage, Silent Noise had taken the opportunity to imprison Hercules. She had also captured Ison and Demetrius, so overall, it was still a good outcome. As for Achilles and Hector, Wuming did not disturb them, just like he did not disturb Karna and Ajo. Now, as long as he got the Holy Grail of Rome, this singularity would be over. With that in mind, Wuming let out a long sigh as he looked at the clouds in the sky. At this moment, because Wuming and Rama did not reply, Demetrius waited there. Because waiting was boring, Demetrius would look at Ison from time to time, but every time, she would turn her head away in an instant. She was very nervous. She should be afraid of being misunderstood by Wuming and Rama. However, how could Wuming and Rama not notice it? Ahem, I already know the specific situation. Wuming clenched his fist and put it on his mouth and coughed. This scared little Medea so much that she trembled and almost cried. Don't worry, I won't do anything to Ison. Wuming shook his head helplessly, trying to calm Demetrius down. But, you cast such a vicious curse on Sir Ison. As she spoke, Demetrius looked like she was about to cry. Isn't it obvious? Wuming said with a bitter smile. I don't believe that Ison will be obedient. After all, he's a hero who can leave his name in a martyr's palace. Although Ison was weak, at least he was invincible when it came to piloting a ship. It could be seen from the fact that Wuming did not feel the slightest tremor when he stood at the bow of the ship. Moreover, the existence that could be chosen by the two great restraints and dragged into the martyr's palace, regardless of whether it was a hero or an anti-hero, would definitely not be the same as ordinary people. Wuming could not be sure if Ison would betray him or do something else when Wuming and the others attacked Rome. Therefore, Wuming planted a lot of complicated Lune Rune tactics in Ison's body. Then, he told Demetrius and Ison that as long as Wuming willed it, Ison would experience what it meant to be in a living hell. Because what he said was true, Ison and Demetrius believed him. Moreover, when Wuming planted those complicated Lune Rune tactics, Demetrius was beside him. No matter how much Ison cried and howled, Ison, who was being held down by Rama, had his body implanted with those tactics in front of Demetrius, who was being watched by Atlanta. However, Wu-ming did not know anything about curses, nor did he study them. So, what he said was a complete lie. However, no matter who saw those extremely complicated and mysterious Lunrune tactics, they would not doubt Wu-ming's words. In the eyes of others, it was an extremely vicious curse. As long as you are obedient, nothing will happen. Wu-ming looked at Demetrius with a smile. Demetrius could only nod helplessly. After all, they could not defeat Wu-ming and the others. Chapter 536. Since Rama used him as a laborer, Aisen's sailing speed was still very fast. Wu-ming estimated that it would only take about 10 minutes to reach Alexandria. Demetrius, who had been staying beside Wu-ming, spoke hesitantly. "What's wrong?" Wu-ming looked at Demetrius and asked, "Just tell me what you want to know. There's no need to beat around the bush." After that, Demetrius took a deep breath and asked the question. "Excuse me, the purplish black hole, just now, was it a teleportation magic?" Wu-ming was stunned for a moment before he realized what she meant. The purplish black hole that Demetrius was referring to was undoubtedly the teleportation door that Wu-ming came to the Argo. "That's a magic trick that I learned from the other world. It's called gate." "Gate?" Demetrius repeated the word as she pondered. "The effect is that based on the place that I've been to or the place that I've seen, I can create a teleportation door anywhere." Wu-ming briefly explained how to use the gate. "Anywhere?" Demetrius was obviously shocked. "Pay attention to the premise. It must be a place that I've been to or the place that I've seen." Wu-ming knocked Demetrius's little head. This scene was extremely similar to a teacher scolding a disobedient student. "Whoa, but even so, it's still very powerful," Demetrius exclaimed as she hugged her little head and cried. Then, are there any side effects or other disadvantages?" Demetrius raised her little hand. At this moment, she was also super interested in magic. "There are no side effects at all. Well, if there's a disadvantage, it's that it can't be instantly teleported." Wu-ming looked at Demetrius with a perfect smile. At this moment, Demetrius's little head was filled with question marks. "After all, you have to open the teleportation door first and then walk in. If you use this trick in a direct battle, it would definitely be useless. Also, if you use this skill in battle, if you can't close it in time, the enemy can also go through the portal. After all, Demetrius could only teleport by herself. That way, she would not be able to bring the enemy along with her." "You're exaggerating. Even if that's the case, the magic you've learned from the other world is already very powerful. As long as you've been to a place before, or even a place as far as your eyes can see, it's really a powerful magic trick." Demetrius was slightly dazed. Indeed, this other world's magic is indeed very powerful. Either it's impossible to use it at all, but once you learn it, not only is the mana consumption low, but you can also move many people. It's much more useful than ordinary spatial magic. "That's amazing," Medea said enviously. "Do you want to learn?" Wu-ming suddenly asked when he saw the envious look on Medea's face. Is it really possible?" Demetrius shouted excitedly. "Of course. You're not Aisen. I have a good impression of you." Wu-ming was right. Such a naive little princess. Because Aisen went to the palace of the beauty goddess to make a wish, she fell in love with Aisen and her life was ruined. Regarding this, Wu-ming naturally did not mind teaching her the portal. Of course, the prerequisite was that Demetrius could learn it. But we're still enemies. Demetrius began to hesitate. It has to be said that even if she had the reputation of a traitor witch, the current Demetrius was undoubtedly an obedient and sensible princess. Because of the hostile relationship between the two of them, she was worried about whether Wu-ming teaching her magic tricks would be inappropriate. She was really a cute little princess. "With the current situation, do you think we can still be considered enemies?" Wu-ming teased. Indeed. Now we're captives." Demetrius smiled awkwardly. "Then, are you willing to learn this magic trick from me, Demetrius?" Wu-ming looked at Demetrius with great respect. "Yes, I'm willing, teacher." Demetrius gripped her staff tightly with a serious expression. At this moment, Aisen seemed to have been removed from Demetrius's mind. Demetrius only wanted to learn the portal magic trick. Then let us begin. Immediately after, a strange scene appeared on the deck. Wuming and Demetrius stood facing each other with their eyes closed. Wuming's hand was placed on Demetrius's head. Both of them did not move at all. This piqued Rama's interest. "My friend, what are you doing?" However, Wuming did not immediately answer Rama. After a moment, Wuming opened his eyes and put down his hand on Demetrius's head. "It's just a simple memory sharing magic trick. After all, it's more efficient this way." All right. Actually, it was Wuming who did not know how to teach. Even he himself used the game scroll to learn the portal magic trick. However, it was not impossible to reverse the process. However, Wuming had never thought of teaching anyone, and no one had asked Wuming. Therefore, Wuming did not research on how to teach others the portal magic trick. After reading the nameless spellbook for a period of time, Wuming did not look at it anymore. It was fine as long as they could use it. Moreover, Wuming did not dare to guarantee that people from other worlds could learn the magic trick of the game Yggdrasil. Wuming also chose to teach Demetrius this magic trick because she was a little girl who was passionate about magic. Without any ambiguity, Wuming and Demetrius' relationship was only that of a teacher and student. Rama did not say anything else. After all, he did not know much about magic and was not very interested in it. Therefore, he walked to the bow of the ship and looked at the scenery. As for Wuming, he looked at Demetrius, who still had her eyes closed. At that moment, Wuming's heart was filled with anticipation. Could the magic trick of the game Yggdrasil be learned by the miraculous hero spirit of this world? Wuming was very curious. After about 10 seconds, Demetrius opened her eyes. Her eyes were as beautiful as gemstones. His eyes were brimming with excitement and joy. The result was obvious. From the looks of it, you should have learned teleportation gate, right, Demetrius? Wuming smiled at Demetrius, pleased. "Yes, teacher, I have successfully learned this magic trick." Demetrius shouted excitedly like a small animal. "Thank you very much, teacher." Demetrius bowed deeply to Wuming to express her gratitude. For Demetrius, who was very interested in magic, being able to learn the magic trick of another world was a great favor. Just as Wuming wanted to say something, Rama, who was at the bow of the ship, spoke. "What?" Chapter 537. "My friend, come and see that," Romo said to Wuming while pointing in a certain direction. Wuming, who reacted, felt that he didn't need to look because the chilling magic power had been transmitted to him. But even so, Wuming continued to shift his gaze in the direction that Roma was pointing at. This place was a few kilometers north of Alexandria City. It could be said that they had not completely arrived at Alexandria City. At the location of Alexandria City, a behemoth appeared at this moment. A huge meat pillar that reached the sky, countless eyes that were constantly twisting, and a huge magic power that belonged to the demon god. Demon god pillar. Wuming narrowed his eyes. There was no doubt that it was the demon god pillar summoned by the Holy Grail of Rome. Could it be that Sharon and the others had forced Rome into a corner? Otherwise, why would the other party casually summon the demon god pillar? Or could it be that Rome's forces were already on the verge of collapse? If that was the case, it was not unimaginable that they would be forced to sacrifice the demon god pillar. Wuming pondered. But this has confirmed that Rome was indeed defeated by Greece. At this moment, the Argo suddenly stopped. Huh? Wuming turned to look at Ison, who was at the helm. However, at this moment, Ison was squatting on the ground with his head in his hands. Even when Atlanta pointed her bow at him, he did not get up. With a sudden jump, Wuming came to the helm. What's going on? This guy suddenly doesn't dare to go forward anymore. Atlanta stared at Ison with disgust. Ison, on the other hand, ignored Atlanta's angry glare, as if he would rather die with his corpse intact. Ison, it seems that you know what that is. Wuming looked at Ison with interest. Of course I know. That's the demon god pillar. If we go there, we'll just be throwing our lives away. Moreover, we won't even have a complete corpse. I don't want to go there. Ison's face was pale, but he still shouted loudly at Wuming. Indeed, Although Wu Ming basically cut down the demon god pillars like vegetables, that was only because Wu Ming's authority was powerful. Basically, every time Wu Ming got rid of a demon god pillar, he would use his authority. After all, demon gods were still gods. The authority obtained from killing gods was especially effective against demon gods. However, even if the demon god pillar was frequently destroyed by Wu Ming, it was undeniable that the demon god pillar possessed the supreme power of a demon god. It could be said that ordinary servants, or even first-class servants, could not defeat a demon god pillar, and the same was true for some of the top servants. Of course, unless one had a special relic or skill, only those who had reached Karna's level would be able to fight against the demon god pillars. As for the servants who were currently in Alexandria, even if Sharon was there was nothing they could do. Wu Ming suddenly thought of someone. If it's that vampire, he might have the power to defeat the demon god pillar. Although Pamelia was a monster and classified as an anti-hero, it was undeniable that the vampire had her own principles and restrictions. If there was a word to describe it, it would be aristocrat. If there was a word to add, it would be mysterious. After all, there was no record of such a vampire from anywhere. However, it was precisely because of this that Wu Ming felt that the other party had the means to deal with the demon god pillar. One must know that keeping a mysterious might not work in other worlds, but in the X-Moon world, it was a universal pass. In short, Wu Ming felt that the other party had that kind of ability. However, even if that was the case, Wu Ming could not choose not to take action. In that case, you stay here alone, we will go there ourselves. Without forcing Ison, Wu Ming took Atlanta away and went to meet with Romo. Before leaving, Atlanta once again stared at Ison fiercely, which scared Ison again. Without caring about Ison, Wu Ming found Demetrius. Since Ison is not willing to go, then Demetrius, you will send us there, Wu Ming said with a smile. Hey, me? Demetrius was a little panicked. After all, at the moment, her spirit base was still that of an innocent little girl. Such a solemn task could be said to be quite difficult for her. Didn't you learn the magic I taught you? Now is the time to test you, Demetrius. Open the place where your eyes can reach. Wu Ming pointed to the direction of the demon god pillar. When Wu Ming said that, Demetrius was stunned. That's right, this is the time to test my results. Immediately afterward, under Wu Ming's encouraging eyes, Demetrius nodded heavily. Yes, I will work hard, teacher. Immediately afterward, Demetrius closed her eyes and began to activate the teleportation gate magic, or rather, magic. Wu Ming directly shared his memories and feelings of using the teleportation gate with Demetrius. Since Demetrius had confidently said that she had learned it, then she must have learned it. Wu Ming did not think that as a famous magician of the gods, Demetrius would deliberately deceive him because she could not learn such magic. As a result, as expected, Demetrius opened her eyes, raised her magic wand, and shouted. Immediately afterward, a pinkish-purple ripple as tall as a person appeared in front of Wu Ming and the other two. Atlanta and Romo looked at the pinkish-purple ripple with an indescribable expression. This made Demetrius blush instantly. Why? The pinkish-purple ripple filled the heart of a young girl. Hey! However, Wu Ming could only helplessly smile bitterly. This was really in line with Demetrius's character. Well done, Demetrius. You are indeed my disciple. After all, the necessary praise could not be lacking. Yes, thank you for your praise, teacher. After hearing her teacher's praise, Demetrius's face changed from red to normal. Although the color was a little strange, it was obvious that Demetrius had successfully released the teleportation gate. After nodding to Atlanta and Romo, the two walked into the teleportation gate. Then, Wu Ming looked at Demetrius. If possible, I really don't want my excellent disciple to fall into the hands of that guy. That guy was undoubtedly referring to Ison. But teacher, I am deeply in love with Lord Ison now. Demetrius did not care about Wu Ming's words. Instead, she showed a faint smile. Forget it. As long as you are happy, my disciple. Wu Ming shook his head with a smile, and walked into the teleportation gate. "I wish you good luck, teacher," Demetrius prayed silently. Chapter 538. In the city of Alexandria, which had become a battlefield, there were ruins everywhere. And under the ruins, there were many residents who lived in the city. Compared to Greece, Celtic, and even Japan, Rome could be described as a force that was incomparably generous to civilians. After all, it was Rome, so it was not surprising. In this way, many residents would choose to live in the safest capital. Those people who were crushed under the ruins were such existences. However, the demon god Pillar did not care about the life and death of those people. In other words, these residents would be attacked indiscriminately like the servants. Of course, the premise was that the servants didn't do anything. Matthew effortlessly lifted a stone slab that was pressing on a woman. Gadotsi quickly went up and helped the woman up. "Are you okay? I will take you to a safe place," Gadotsi said eagerly. "Child, my child," the woman said weakly, looking at the collapsed house. Gadotsi and Matthew could not bear to look at the woman. The possibility of a baby being crushed under such a collapsed house was almost zero. However, as if there was a temporary traffic jam in the underworld, the baby did not lose his life. Wah, wah, as if he heard the voice of his mother, a baby's cry came. "My child." The woman wanted to rush to the ruins to save her child. However, she was seriously injured, and after leaving Gadotsi's support, she directly collapsed to the ground. "Are you okay? Don't worry. We will save you, child." Gadotsi quickly supported the woman who collapsed to the ground. Then Gadotsi nodded to Matthew. Matthew was stunned, nodded, and was ready to save the child. Human life is so strong and beautiful. Matthew smiled and thought. Then a tentacle suddenly stretched out, or rather, smashed down. The target seemed to be Gadotsi. Matthew naturally quickly came to Gadotsi's side and blocked the attack with a shield. After Matthew came to Gadotsi's side, Gadotsi's wrist suddenly made a sound. "Matthew, its target is the child." As if confirming the voice's words, the tentacle dramatically and strangely changed its direction, and its target was the ruins where the baby's cry came from. "No!" The child's mother screamed at the top of her lungs, trying to stop the tentacles. However, it all happened so fast that Gadotsi, the woman, and even Matthew were powerless to stop it. Matthew did not expect the tentacles to be so strange. Using Gadotsi as bait, he forced Matthew to change the formation. As a result, his target became the baby under the ruins. Just like that, the tentacle fell towards the baby. Just as the tentacle was about to fall, a voice sounded in Mashu's and Gudazi's ears. "Brahmastra, indestructible Rakshasa." In an instant, the indestructible blade spun with thunder and hit the tentacle. The tentacle was sent flying with an indescribable sound that sounded like a scream. The powerful and perfectly controlled power did not hurt the ruins below when it sent the tentacle flying. Taking advantage of this moment, Matthew went directly to the place where the baby was crying. He used his magic to gently clean up the ruins, revealing the cute child who was miraculously alive in the corner. Although the baby was still crying, it was indeed a symbol of life in everyone's eyes. "Great!" Matthew quickly picked up the baby, came to the woman, and handed the baby to the woman, the baby's mother. "Thank you, my child, my child." After hurriedly thanking Gadotsi and Matthew, the woman held her child and kept talking. The indestructible blade flew back after sending the tentacle monkey flying. Matthew looked at the person in surprise. "It's really Mr. Rama." It was Rama's noble phantasm that sent the tentacle flying. But Gadotsi was concerned about another thing. "In other words, Assassin is also here." Gadotsi looked around, but she did not find any trace of Wuming. At this time, looking at Gadotsi, who was searching around, Rama spoke. "Don't look for him. My friend is not here." Then, Gadotsi's little face looked like she was crying. How could this be? On the other side, Sharon and the other so-called main battle servants were in charge of attacking. Wah dash! while Elizabeth jumped and dodged a huge tentacle attack. How rude. How could you treat a lady like this? While Elizabeth patted the dust on her dress with lingering fear and said with dissatisfaction, Miss, what time is it now? Do you still care about those things? Robin Hood complained, rolled, and fired a few useless shots at the huge demon god pillar not far away. Take care of yourself, Green Rat. While Elizabeth shouted at Robin Hood angrily. Robin Hood could only helplessly take a few steps back, a look of discomfort on his face. Then, the blue and white flame flew past Elizabeth's hair. What dash! Why Elizabeth screamed in fear. Do you want to kill me? Why Elizabeth touched her hair and looked at Kyoheim with tears in her eyes. Sure enough, your lizard is useless. Kyoheim did not answer why Elizabeth directly, but released the flame at the demon god pillar while mocking why Elizabeth. Of course, Kyoheim's attack was not very effective. Do you want to fight, fire-breathing snake? Why Elizabeth stared at Kyoheim fiercely. Come on, I'm not afraid of you. And Kyoheim also stared back at why Elizabeth. Sigh. Robin Hood sighed helplessly. This is a battlefield, young misses. The enemy is a demon god pillar. Take it easy. Even if they seriously deal with the demon god pillar, it won't have any effect. Billy Boy, who suddenly appeared, pressed his hat, and his face was full of helplessness. After hearing Billy Boy's words, Robin Hood also showed a helpless smile. As a servant, their spiritual base was too low, and they couldn't cause damage to the demon god pillar. They couldn't even attract or restrain it. Only a few tentacles attacked them, and they were the waterproof kind, because the other tentacles were attacking Sharon. Geronimo, who was following behind Billy Boy, frowned helplessly and looked to the north. I hope the second team can complete the mission smoothly. Then they could support them. Then, Geronimo saw the lightning that represented the indestructible blade and smiled. They're coming. Chapter 539. On the so-called head-on battlefield, Karong transformed into a centaur, attacking the demon god pillars with his bow in the midst of the mechanical infantry. Sharon was able to hit the demon god pillar's eyes with his skills. Why was it only at the beginning? It was because the demon god pillar was no fool and knew how to defend. Karen retreated slightly, and countless mechanical infantry rushed towards the demon god pillar. However, the demon god pillar only needed to use a few dozen tentacles to directly blow up the mechanical infantry that were attacking it. This is a disaster. Edison roared as he hugged the lion's head behind the countless mechanical infantry soldiers. So noisy, be quiet. But at Madame Blavatsky's snarl, Edison obediently held his tongue. If this continues, we will be wiped out. Sharon frowned and came to the two to see if they could come up with a plan. The three looked at Nightingale, who was charging with the mechanical soldiers, but was constantly being pushed back. They felt helpless and relieved. If not for Nightingale's stubborn personality, she would not have attracted the demon god pillar. After all, it was a berserker. However, if this continues, something will happen to Miss Nightingale. Helena looked worriedly at Nightingale, who was constantly spinning and jumping under the demon god pillar's tentacles and was sent flying again. As if toying with Nightingale, the demon god pillar did not use its full strength. Although it seemed like the demon god pillar's attacks were ineffective, Sharon and the others noticed that the demon god pillar was going easy on them. Otherwise, it would not have the time to attack Matthew and the others. If we look at the worst-case scenario, this demon god pillar might be smarter than we thought. Helena frowned as if she was facing a great enemy. I have a bad feeling. I feel like the demon god pillar is waiting for something. Karen's face darkened. This way, the demon god pillar was definitely scheming something. Edison was like a lion and did not understand the conversation between the two. At this moment, a voice resounded through the sky. A gigantic spear of light that had never appeared before came from afar and hit the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar let out an unrecognizable voice. It was obvious that the noble artifact's owner had poured a huge amount of magic into this attack. The noble artifact was released. That was the Holy King's voice. Edison said as he looked around for Wu Ming. Over there, Sharon pointed. At this moment, Wu Ming, with his A+ great agility, launched a surprise attack on the demon god pillar. At this moment, Wu Ming had already put on his armor and wore a helmet that completely covered his head. Wu Ming was like a silver dragon. As for the demon god pillar, it was as if the person it was waiting for had arrived. Regardless of whether it was the mechanical infantry or nightingale, the demon god pillar no longer cared about them. Countless tentacles extended from the demon god pillar's muscles to attack. Wu Ming at the same time, the Wu Ming was the demon god pillars and Wu Ming. Countless tentacles surrounded Wu Ming from all directions, which could be described as a killing move for ordinary servants. However, for Wu Ming, although it was dangerous, it was not fatal. Wu Ming did not stop and continued to run toward the demon god pillar, ignoring the Wu Ming's corrosive tentacles. Wum dash, the air vibrated, and a buzzing sound was heard. Then, the magic around Wu Ming's body condensed, and under Wu Ming's control, the condensed magic exploded in the surroundings. Boom! A dull sound was heard, and a ring of magic that could be seen with the naked eye spread out from Wu Ming in an instant. The encirclement formed by the Wu Ming's tentacles was instantly broken through by the magic that could be seen with the naked eye. Like petals, the tentacles were fragmented and turned into pure magic that dissipated. This was pure power that did not require any fancy tricks. What? Helena was shocked when she saw this scene. What's wrong? Edison asked cautiously. Madame Blavatsky was just sighing at his strength. Sharon smiled helplessly and explained to Edison. Just the simple release of magic was enough to destroy the metal of the tentacles that everyone worked together to destroy. From this, it could be seen how powerful Wu Ming was in terms of the amount and control of magic. Compressing a large amount of magic, condensing it around his body, and then releasing the compressed magic in the form of Wu Ming's magic was a test of his control. And the premise of this was that he had sufficient magic power. It could be said that the magic power just now was comparable to the magic power required by the light spear, or even exceeded it by a lot. To be able to use the magic power of such a noble artifact to release magic power, it was not something that a first-rate servant could do. It could be said that even a first-rate servant would not have such magic power. After all, if the amount of magic power was not enough, it would be impossible to do it. And to be able to use that kind of magic power twice without batting an eyelid, it could be seen that Wu Ming was not ordinary. The most important thing was that Wu Ming only used magic power to destroy the tentacles, which was enough to prove that Wu Ming was powerful. True power was not a fancy ability, but a kind of power that had reached the pinnacle. So that's how it is. Your Excellency, Holy Ruler, is indeed Your Excellency, Holy Ruler, to be so powerful. Edison's lion head showed an expression of sudden realization. However, such an expression was quite comical in the eyes of others. Since the Holy Ruler is here, it means that the Greek side has been resolved. Helena breathed a sigh of relief. Sharon seemed to agree with Helena's opinion and nodded. However, I feel a little uneasy about the demon god pillar here. Sharon looked at the demon god pillar. As a sage who had taught many heroes, Sharon had a feeling. That demon god pillar was not an ordinary one, but one with a strong will. It could be seen from the previous performance, so Sharon was very worried that the other side was up to something. However, even if there was a conspiracy, such a battle was not something they could investigate. In short, we should take this opportunity to save a few more injured residents. We can't let down Tachika's sincerity. The three nodded and slipped away from the battlefield. At the same time, they also took away Nightingale, who still wanted to charge at the demon god pillar. Edison brought the few remaining mechanical infantry and began to search for survivors. On Wu Ming's side, Wu Ming looked at the demon god pillar and vaguely felt a sense of familiarity. But even so, Wu Ming's actions did not stop. Wu Ming waved his hand, and the holy spear of light appeared out of nowhere and landed in Wu Ming's hand. Then, Wu Ming raised the spear of light to his shoulder and threw it at the demon god pillar like a javelin. The spear of light gradually thinned and turned into a needle of light. However, the demon god pillar only summoned a few more tentacles, blocking the needle of light. Wu Ming was not surprised. After all, Wu Ming had only injected a small amount of magic power, so it was not surprising that the demon god pillar could block it. At this moment, the demon god pillar suddenly spoke. "Dragon of Origin, you're finally here." Chapter 540. Wu Ming's expression changed as he recognized the voice. "Lev." Wu Ming said the name. "As expected of the Dragon of Origin, you still remember me. But my current name is Flawlos, Demon God Pillar Flawlos." The Demon God Pillar laughed. "But I don't think it's such a coincidence that the Demon God Pillar summoned this time is you." Wu Ming didn't believe that this wasn't Lev's doing. With 72 Demon God Pillars, Wu Ming didn't think his luck would be so good. The 72 Demon God Pillars are one. "Unless you can destroy all the Demon God Pillars in an instant, I won't die." Demon God Pillar Flawlos laughed eerily with Lev's voice. Wu Ming could imagine Lev's ugly face. However, this provided Wu Ming with information. "I did think that you wouldn't die so easily, but I didn't expect us to meet so soon." Wu Ming didn't attack again, and Demon God Pillar Flawlos didn't attack either. The two of them started talk. "This can't be helped. I'm the Demon God Pillar in charge of the information room." In other words, the other party might be able to see Wu Ming through some means or opportunity. "As soon as you came to this singularity, I was already paying attention to you through the Holy Grail, serene." As if victory was already in his hands, Demon God Pillar Flawlos said slowly. Wu Ming couldn't wait for someone to tell him the current situation, so he didn't disturb him and calmly listened to the Demon God Pillar. "Oh, then what about that guy? Didn't he come personally? The chaos here is a gift he prepared for me. I don't want to steal the limelight." Wu Ming mocked the Magic King. "Why would our king care about an immature dragon of origin? To tell you the truth, even if the master of Chaldea conquered all 7 singularities with your help, it wouldn't affect our king at all." In other words, the other party had the confidence to win, or had the strength to not be disturbed. Wu Ming pondered. "This is also the reason why our great king let you go in London's underground cavern." Demon God Pillar Flawlos let out a terrifying laugh. Wu Ming frowned, but didn't refute him. Wu Ming clearly knew that he was indeed very weak. When facing a powerful enemy like the Magic King who was strengthened by the Black Origin soil, Wu Ming only had 2 things that could compare. The 12 incarnations who killed God, stole the god's authority, and combined with his own abilities and origin baptism. Also the Blade of Salvation, Divine Blade Savior's authority. The Blade of Salvation was also the Divine Blade Messiah's power. Although many of Wu Ming's abilities had been baptized by origin, there was no doubt that an ability or item with a high starting point would have a high achievement after being baptized by origin, just like the 12 incarnations and Blade of Salvation. Other than that, whether it was the Loon magic that Wu Ming had learned, the World Tree's magic from the alternate world, or the various powerful items that he had obtained, or even the relics that had been turned into Wu Ming's own, they were all rather useless. That was because when facing an enemy like the Magic King, these abilities and relics were useless. Moreover, Flawlos also said that Wu Ming was an immature root dragon. Although in the eyes of many, Wu Ming was already very powerful, Wu Ming himself knew that he was actually very weak. After staying in the root dragon for a long time, Wu Ming gradually realized that a mature root dragon could be said to be the ruler of all the worlds, the protector of all the worlds. If he had to use a word to describe it, it would be the suppression of all the worlds. In other words, it was the heavenly axiom. It could be said that it was precisely because Wu Ming knew that he would eventually become such an existence that Wu Ming began to face the love that Maeve and the others had for him. After all, if Wu Ming kept delaying until then, perhaps Wu Ming's heart would really have turned into the merciless heavenly Tao. Take the planet's consciousness, Gaia, and the human consciousness, Aleia, as an example. As long as it did not threaten Earth and the human race as a whole, they would not care. Moreover, if it was only a threat to one side, the other side would basically not care. For example, in the crisis of the M-Moon world, the Magic King's means had threatened Alea, so Alea naturally had to do her best to save it. The Holy Grail's ability to summon servants on its own was the self-defense mechanism that Alea had activated. However, because the Gaia and Alea of this world had a slightly special relationship, the two of them could be considered to be in love. Probably cough cough. In short, if Wuming had reached adulthood, then there was no doubt that he would be able to defeat the Magic King effortlessly. But now, the Magic King who had the origin Black Mud was not afraid of Wuming, who was an immature origin dragon. After all, if Hope was killed in the cradle, then this so-called hope would be nothing. Then, what is the meaning of your current actions? Is it purely for the sake of waiting for me to pass the time? Wuming was naturally referring to the matter of pretending to be led by the nose by Sharon and the others. Not only that, Wuming, who had fully activated his mental power, saw why Elizabeth and the others' futility, and also saw that Flawlose was deliberately targeting Gadotsi and Matthew. Wuming sensed that one of the tentacles of the demon god pillar was absent-minded, and his intuition told him that Gadotsi and Matthew, who were searching for survivors, were in danger. Wuming trusted his intuition the most. As the origin dragon, all the world would subconsciously help Wuming, and this so-called intuition was also the help of similar worlds. Otherwise, why would Romo meet Gadotsi so coincidentally and repel the tentacle that wanted to kill the child Matthew was about to rescue? It was because Romo was asked by Wuming to meet Gadotsi and the others. Just treat it as my selfishness towards Matthew. Flawlose, or rather Lev, was silent for a few seconds before answering Wuming. Oh, the demon god pillar has selfishness? That's really surprising. You don't have to deliberately mock me. No matter what, I have spent a lot of time in Chaldea. After saying that, Flawlose stopped talking about this and turned to the root of this matter. Then, let's start the ravaging. Treat it as the price for the ravaging you did to me. As he said that, the countless eyes on the demon god pillar lit up with red light, and countless black and purple mist emitted from the demon god pillar. The ravaging began. Chapter 541. Needless to say, the demon god pillar Flawlose this time was different from the one Wuming encountered in the Winterwood City. Not only was the shape and color more vigorous, but the attack power of the demon god pillar had also increased a lot. Because Flawlose's target was Wuming, it did not disperse its attack. Instead, it deliberately gathered together to attack Wuming. Wuming naturally did not die in the first wave of attack, but he was slightly injured. Looking at the ground around the demon god pillar that was destroyed by the demon god mist and heat ray, Wuming's sense of danger towards Flawlose increased by another level. The power of the heat ray emitted by the demon god pillar's eyes increased a lot. Anyway, it gave Wuming a sense of crisis. Although it was a little exaggerated, Wuming did rely on his skills and speed to avoid the heat ray. However, because it brushed past him several times, Wuming felt the intensity of the heat ray. Not only that, the dark purple demon mist was also a lot stronger. It could be said that if it were Elizabeth and the other servants, they would not be able to last more than 5 seconds in the demon mist. As for Sharon, who was restrained by poison, the demon mist with the poison attribute could even send Sharon back to the martyr's palace when it came in contact with him. Wuming had the noble armor, so his body was not hurt. However, the demon mist had the ability to ignore defense and corrode the spiritual base. A part of Wuming's spiritual base was directly corroded. As a result, Wuming repeatedly used his magic to release skills and rushed out of the area covered by the demon mist. The demon god pillar Flawlose seemed to be deliberately playing with Wuming. After the first wave, it retracted the demon mist and did not attack again. How is it, Cylinder? This is the power that our king has bestowed upon us. The demon god pillar's eyes spun faster, and the demon mist was vaguely released again. It was not a precursor to an attack, but a sign of excitement and demonstration. After stretching his limbs, Wuming felt relieved when he sensed that Gadatsi, Sharon, and Elizabeth had retreated. His body was a servant's body that he created. Even if he died, it wouldn't matter. But Gadatsi wasn't like that. She was a complete human being. Seeing that Gadatsi and the others were covering the few rescued residents and retreating into the distance, Wuming once again used his mental power to search the ruins. Wuming heaved a sigh of relief after checking that there were no living beings. This way, he wouldn't have to worry about his surroundings. Your power comes from the Holy Grail, right? Since the Holy Grail was created by the Magic King, it's not hard to guess that it's able to help you demon god pillars. Wuming did not feel dispirited because the demon god pillar Flawless temporarily gained the upper hand. Instead, he began to make inferences. Oh, that's true. But so what? Flawless believed in the power given by its king. It was not afraid of Wuming's pretending to be calm in its eyes. This is power. The power that can defeat you in this era. The demon god pillar roared. Countless heat rays and demon mist attacked again. The momentum was much stronger than before. After I kill you, I'll kill everyone in this era. Who cares about being the last master of mankind? I'll let Chaldea and the others meet their doom in despair. At that moment, Flawless was a little excited. However, this had nothing to do with Wuming. He continued to dodge. Wuming retreated 1,000 meters away. Indeed, this body doesn't have the ability to deal with you for the time being. Even if it was the legend of the Holy King, mythical Yggdrasil, its greatest power without charging could only injure the demon god pillar that had obtained the power of the Magic King. If he wanted to kill it, he would need to charge up for a long time. Of course, Flawless would not give Wuming the chance. That was why Wuming did not have the ability to deal with Flawless for the time being. But unfortunately, I've just become good friends with Rama. Wuming smiled at Flawless. However, this smile made Flawless feel uneasy. Although Flawless was not afraid of Wuming, he did not think that Wuming was bluffing. What if he really had a way to deal with him? With this thought, Flawless increased the amount of magic output. In an instant, the countless eyes on the demon god pillar began to bleed. The amount of magic output exceeded the demon god pillar's tolerance and hurt itself instead. However, the result was a dark ball of light that was comparable to the power of dozens of holy swords appearing in front of the demon god pillar. Wuming could feel that if the dark ball of light exploded or formed into a light cannon, the power would definitely be able to blow up a huge hole in the American continent. It could even be said that it would not be difficult to create a new lake. It could be said that if Wuming did not activate his noble artifact, Arthur's gift, he would have been forced to leave the stage after being injured by this attack. As Flawless, who had been observing Wuming ever since he came to this singularity, he naturally knew that Wuming had such a noble phantasm. However, he knew that Wuming's noble phantasm was not like the legendary Avalon that could form an invincible domain. Wuming's noble phantasm was only an invincible shield. In that case, he only needed to go around the invincible shield. As Flawless, who had accepted the power of his king, he naturally had such a method. No matter if it was using the space fault or forcefully turning the light cannon, Flawless could do it. At that moment, Wuming moved according to Flawless' prediction. The armor on Wuming's body instantly disintegrated. Without a doubt, Wuming was ready to use this invincible shield. However, the next scene made Flawless think that Wuming was crazy. After the armor disintegrated, the various parts quickly flew around the demon god pillar, surrounding the demon god pillar and Wuming. Then, every armor part began to connect with each other. A seemingly transparent but incomparable light film appeared, wrapping Wuming and the demon god pillar Flawless, leaving only the sky. After all, the height of the demon god pillar could be said to be so high that one could not see the end. To be more specific, at that moment, an incomparable square barrier with no top covered each of them. It was the kind of invincible light barrier that would not affect the outside world because the aftermath would reach the sky. If the power was really strong, it could directly break through the atmosphere. There is only one word to describe it, and that was Trapped Beast Deathmatch. I see. Looks like you want to die together with me, Flawlow's said mockingly. In such a confined space, no matter if Flawlow's dark light ball exploded or acted as a light cannon, the end result would be him being injured or even killed. Even with the top as a vent, no, it should be because of this vent that the aftermath of the damage would spread to the demon god pillar that reached the sky. Wu-Ming smiled. Then I'm sorry. You think too much. Then, Wu-Ming waved one hand, and a few weapons appeared behind Wu-Ming. I just don't want my attack to hurt Tachika. Chapter 542. At that moment, Wu-Ming looked like Gilgamesh, who was using the Gate of Babylon. However, the only difference was that the 5 armies were not lined up side by side behind Wu-Ming. Dozens of glowing weapons floated around Wu-Ming like stars surrounding the moon, wrapping around Wu-Ming. There were many types of weapons, such as discs, javelins, long sticks, short sticks, trident spears, giant swords, whiplocks, giant hammers, bows and arrows, and so on. Wu-Ming waved his hands, and the weapons around him seemed to be pulled as they rotated slowly. Flawlow's, on the other hand, began to guard against Wu-Ming's meaningless attack. What do you mean? Demon God Pillar Flawlow's voice sounded a little frightened. Although it was not afraid of Wu-Ming's tricks, it had no choice as the sun's incarnation had scared it. After all, the sun was not a trick, but a killer move that could be fatal. In the big hole in Winterwood City, Wu-Ming's sun made Flawlow's suffer. In the end, Flawlow's body could not take it anymore, so Lev came out to replace it. In the end, Lev was also tortured by Wu-Ming's flame until he fainted. After all, Wu-Ming's sun incarnation was an inextinguishable flame. Almost nothing could extinguish the sun incarnation that Wu-Ming used. You're just bluffing. Don't try to scare me. Flawlow's roared. Its eyes bulged slightly, and the dark light ball in front of it doubled in size. Although that was what it said, to make Flawlow's so angry, it was obvious that it had been suppressed. Wu-Ming could see through its trick of using anger to cover up its fear. To put it simply, Flawlow's was actually deceiving itself. Indeed, this body does not have the ability to deal with you. But don't forget about the Holy Grail. As he said that, Wu-Ming took out the Holy Grail that he had obtained in Denver from his precious artifact space. Difficult. Flawlow's recalled the fear of being dominated by the sun. Through the connection between the demon god pillars and his own intelligence ability, Flawlow's naturally knew how demon god Shudong, who had fused with the demon god pillar, died. The sun. With the blessing of the sun god given by Wu-Ming through Tamamo no Me and the Holy Grail as a medium, Wu-Ming successfully summoned the sun incarnation. As if expelling all darkness, the incomparably dazzling sunlight illuminated the earth, and the world fell into white. This was the last scene that Floro saw through Demon God Shudong's perspective. Then, it was like a broken string, and nothing else could be seen. Floro's was very sure that it was the sun that had once ravaged him. But fortunately, it seemed that this move could only be used once. The blessing of the sun god had been completely used up. Since then, I have been paying attention to you. You didn't receive the blessing of the sun god at all. Floro's roared. The funny thing was that he could have released his sure-kill dark light ball directly. While Wu-Ming was still talking to Floro's, he could have killed Wu-Ming. However, Floro's was already terrified. Looking weak on the outside was not scary, but the pain in his heart was fatal. I'm not going to use that move. Just as you said, I don't have the blessing of the sun god as a medium anymore. Wu-Ming smiled and shook his head. However, Wu-Ming's smile was incomparably terrifying in Floro's eyes. With a roar, the dark light ball in front of the demon god pillar exploded instantly, forming a huge dark light beam that swept towards Wu-Ming. However, facing Floro's light beam, Wu-Ming was not nervous at all. Didn't you say that I was scaring you? Then, whether I'm scaring you or not, it's up to you to try it yourself, Floro's. As he spoke, the weapons that were emitting golden light around Wu-Ming instantly gathered together and integrated into the Holy Grail that Wu-Ming was holding. Swooshed on. The huge light beam instantly covered Wu-Ming, But the light beam did not stop. Instead, it exploded towards the back and instantly hit the defensive light wall formed by Wu Ming's noble artifact. There was a huge collision sound. At this moment, a light beam that was extremely small compared to the light beam shot out from the demon god pillar and soared into the sky. Then, the light beam slashed from top to bottom, quickly and fiercely, and Floro's light beam was split apart. After the light beam disappeared, Wu Ming's figure appeared. Not only was he unscathed, but the holy grail in his hand was also gone. Instead, there was a holy sword that was similar to the sword of victory, but more elegant and powerful. What? Floros was horrified. It could not accept and was not willing to accept this result. That's the power of our king. How could you dissolve it so easily? Floros could no longer calm down. That sword, where did it come from? As if all eyes were about to pop out, countless eyes looked at the holy sword in Wu Ming's hand. I don't need to say anything more to you, Floros. As he spoke, Wu Ming raised the holy sword in his hand and injected magical power into it. The holy sword erupted with holy thunder and unprecedented light. It was an ultimate power that seemed to be able to split a star. Even the invincible light film formed by the armor could not completely block such power, because it was not a damage. Just like that, the power that could split a star seeped outside. In an instant, the ground of the singularity let out a sorrowful cry, and the sky was shrouded by dark clouds. Gadatsi, who felt uneasy, did not want to leave no matter what. She insisted on waiting not far away. She was waiting for the disaster to end, or waiting for the disaster to come. Inside the invincible light film formed by the armor. Damn, the dragon of origin! Floros seemed to have known his ending. He was not willing to accept his end and launched an attack. Compared to the beginning, the number and quality of tentacles were one step higher. The heat ray that was comparable to the holy sword and the demon mist that was so dark that it made people tremble were all attacking Wu Ming. The price that Floros paid for releasing these super powerful attacks was that the entire body of the demon god pillar had shrunk by at least 3 times. At that moment, the demon god pillar was like a bamboo pole that was about to die. However, Wu Ming did not care about it at all. Before these attacks arrived, Wu Ming only slashed in the direction of Floros. In an instant, the power that could split a star turned into a light beam that was even bigger than the one released by the demon god pillar. Looking at this power that could definitely destroy Gaia, Floros finally understood why Wu Ming used the invincible defense to trap them one by one. It was not that he wanted to use the power of the demon god pillar to perish together, but Wu Ming was afraid of hurting this land, this singularity. Floros had no doubt that Wu Ming's move could directly break this singularity. Then, Floros did not know what happened, because the power of the holy sword that could split a star had already covered it. In the outside world, Gadatsi's face was gloomy. Behind her stood a group of followers. Everyone looked nervously at the transparent barrier not far away that was covered in white. Ka Rong raised his head and looked at the light beam that had already rushed out of the sky. He felt the magic power that could break the barrier and let out a sigh of relief. It seems that he is hiding an unimaginable identity. Chapter 543. The reason why Sharon was relieved was because the beam of light was gradually weakening. Because if the intensity just now continued, Sharon believed that this singularity would probably explode. If there was space, the energy would rush out of the atmosphere and enter space. But unfortunately, there was no space here. After all, this was a singularity that was out of human nature. In other words, this was actually an independent subspace. In subspace, there was no universe. In fact, it was because Wu Ming finally thought of this that he gradually weakened the beam of light. Not to mention the servants, Gadatsi and Matthew were doomed. Did they really think that the power of time and space was illusory? As mentioned before, if Wu Ming didn't have the Dragon of Origin's racial talent of time and space, he wouldn't dare to travel through time and space at will. Gem Wooming also relied on the records of his existence in each world, and combined with the second law to be able to travel through parallel worlds. Unlike Rick's world and the world of the God Slayer, there were no records of Gem Wooming's existence. This was also one of the reasons why Gem Wooming couldn't come to other worlds and could only travel through parallel worlds. Back to the main topic. After Wooming destroyed the demon god Pillar, the invincible light wall around him automatically disintegrated and turned back into armor on Wooming's body. The sky and the earth also returned to their original state, and the mournful cry disappeared. And the place that was originally covered by the invincible light film was now 3 feet underground. It couldn't be helped. Wooming's beam of light didn't only extend upward, but also underground. It could be said that if Wooming didn't deliberately leave the sky and didn't create a sealed space, the earth would have been penetrated by now. Of course, the result of this singularity was the destruction of the singularity. He didn't care about the hole in the earth that he created. After all, the singularity would automatically repair the place that was different from the original work. Regarding the singularity's automatic repair of everything that happened in the singularity, Wooming actually knew about that drawback. Those who were killed by servants would not be resurrected after the singularity was restored. Instead, after the singularity was restored, the world would modify them to be killed by bandits. After all, a person's life and death wasn't something that a mere world could casually interfere with. Or rather, in the eyes of the world, those who were killed were already dead. The only thing that was fixed was the process of being killed. The result wouldn't change. Wooming guessed that Gadotsi and the others still didn't know about this. Wooming didn't think that Roman would be so heartless to tell them this fact. It was a sad story. Immediately after, Wooming discovered Gadotsi and the others not far away. Wooming flew towards Gadotsi and the others. Assassin. Gadotsi rushed into Wooming's arms and hugged Wooming's neck with tears in her eyes. Wooming was so scared that he could only let go of the holy sword in his hand and let it float beside Wooming, while Wooming's hands hugged Gadotsi. Wooming gently patted the little girl's back. He was a little confused for a moment. What's going on? At this time, Karen stood up. Master, she has been worried about you, and she doesn't want to leave. Karen laughed helplessly. In fact, when Gadotsi wanted to stay in the beginning, Sharon was opposed to it. After all, even if all their servants died here, they couldn't let Gadotsi get hurt. Just as Karen was about to take Gadotsi away, Matthew took the lead and stood up. I believe in senpai, and I also believe in senpai. Karen was stunned by that pair of noble and flawless eyes. Then, more servants voted, and the result was that they basically stood on Gadotsi's side. I don't think my friend will lose. I've even lent him all my weapons. It was not easy for me to defeat Hector again. I did not come here to escape. The Apache gods will protect him. I was ordered by that man to protect Tachika. Even if I am a hunter, I will not go back on my words. My husband will be fine. Migu, it was him who woke me up from being influenced by the president's power. I will support him. These were the thoughts of the servants who directly chose to stay. But the servants who indirectly chose to stay were more strange. Shala will stay. I will stay too. Anjin-sama will stay. I will stay too. Edison-sama is also enlightened. In that case, I will stay too. Demon God Pillar is a virus. It needs to be eliminated. So troublesome, I have to stay too. Well, I will accompany the ladies. Of course, there were a lot of strange reasons, but it could be said that except for Karen, all the servants directly or indirectly chose to stay with Gadotsi. But what could Karen do? He could not beat up these servants who protected Gadotsi and take away Gadotsi. So he could only stay together. Although he did not believe in Wooming, but as the wise one in the team, he always had to consider the safety of the general. In that case, let's wait here together. In the end, Karen also cast his almost useless vote. Thinking of the vote just now, Karen felt powerless. In short, Senpai is very worried about Senpai. Matthew looked at Gadotsi in Wooming's arms. At this moment, she felt that her Senpai was an ordinary little girl. Wooming could only smile helplessly. Then Wooming patted Gadotsi's little head. Have you forgotten that I'm not dead? Even if this spirit base is gone, my body is still intact. However, Gadatsi raised her head from Wuming's arms and looked at Wuming with tears in her eyes. But I'm just worried about you. This scene made Kaioheim and Tamuname show signs of anger, but they were held down by Elisabeth, Helena, and others. You little girl, Wuming didn't know what to say and could only pinch Gadatsi's little nose. Hee, just like the weather in June. Gadatsi's tearful face instantly turned into a smiling face. Holding Gadatsi like this, Wuming began to ask about business. By the way, how far did you push Rome's forces? How did they summon the demon god Pillar directly? Let me answer this question. At this time, a weak voice came. It was no doubt Roman. Roman? Has Chaldea replied. Already? That's fast. Wuming complained. How can not be fast? Da Vinci is exhausted. At this time, Olga Marie's figure was suddenly projected on the side. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.